Comcast Channel 12 and Verizon Channel 42. As a friendly reminder, please turn off your cell phone ringers and please stay muted while not speaking to assist with clear audio. The meeting will be civil and all people treated respectfully. The format of the meeting will be when an item is called by the chair, the applicant will present their application to the board. The board will proceed to staff comments. Board members will ask questions of the applicant and have a board discussion. For public hearing items, the public will be given an opportunity to comment. Items that are not a public hearing, the opportunity for public comment will be at the discretion of the board chair. Please, only one person speaking at a time. When it's time for the public comment period for the public hearings, the chair will ask those wishing to speak to use the raise hand feature in Zoom, or attendees may type a question in the Q&A section. To raise your hand, click on the raised hand icon at the bottom of the screen and wait for the host to call on you and unmute you. You may then click lower hand afterwards. For those participating by phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and wait for the host to unmute you. Once unmuted, please identify yourself by stating your name and address for the record. Please direct all comments and questions through the chair. All people will be given the opportunity to speak, but in the interest of time and fairness, repetitive or off-topic comments may be cut short. For items that are not in a public hearing, public comment, it is at the discretion of the board and chair. For items that are not a public hearing, it's encouraged to place comments in a Q&A, and the chair may read and respond. Attendees will not be on video, but will be unmuted if called on during the public comment portion. Nora, do we have any changes to tonight's agenda?
So not a change to the agenda, but there's one item you may want to take out of order or just make an announcement about the Obed Baker House application for FMUOD special permit. The applicant has requested a continuance to March 7th. So you could either make a motion to continue that at the start of your meeting, or you can just announce that you intend to do that so no one sticks around unnecessarily waiting for that application to come up.
Okay. Josh has not joined us, has he? I don't see him, or has he? Oh, there he is. Josh, you're here. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
I started reading, you weren't here, and now you're here. Good. So we're all here. Does the board have any issue with voting for continuance for the hearing that she just referred to? Doing it now, or should we wait till it's in the item in the agenda? We'll address that in the agenda item also when we get there, in case people come in the middle. But what would the board like to do? Vote now to continue, or wait till the section of the agenda? If someone wants to make the motion, then we'll consider that to vote on continuance now. If not, then we'll wait.
I'll make a motion to continue the meeting to March 7th for the Obed Baker House.
Okay, if you just hold on a second, let me show you, let me display the precise motion, because we have to have the link included in it. So just let me get to that portion and I'll display it. Sorry it takes so long, just 1 minute. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
I do.
If you could read that motion.
I move the planning board continue the public hearing for the flexible multiple use overlay district FMUOD special permit application for the proposed Obed Baker House mixed use redevelopment at 909 High Street to Tuesday, March 7th, 2023 at 7 p.m. via Zoom, where a Zoom link and associated call-in numbers will be provided on town's calendar on the homepage at https://www.townhall.westwood.ma.us/.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to continue in a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote. Kate.
Aye.
Ellen.
Aye.
Josh.
Aye.
Phil,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. So I don't know what number on the agenda that is, Nora. Maybe we can repeat that for the audience, but that hearing for the Obed Baker House has been continued till March 7th.
Thank you.
Okay. First one, and we'll readdress that when we get to that item, just in case people came in the middle of the meeting, waiting to talk about that. First item on the agenda, Nora?
The first item is a scenic road application for tree removal on Downey and Canton streets in association with a proposed sidewalk expansion. And that would be between Booth Drive on the intersection of Booth Drive and Downey Street down to the intersection with Canton Street and then around the corner on Canton Street, I believe for approximately 200 feet. And
Okay.
let me see if the applicants are available. John Rockwell is the applicant. I'll bring him over, promote him to a panelist. And Karen Skinner-Catroni, our tree warden, are making a panelist as well. This is a joint public hearing of the planning board and the tree warden. John, is there anyone else that you need to have brought in?
I don't believe so.
All right. Well, the floor is yours, and you may share your screen at any time.
Okay, appreciate that. Let me share my screen quickly. Just first introduction, John Rockwell, project manager with TEC, the town's design consultant for this project.
Welcome.
Thank you. Let's see. All right, can you all see the title sheet here of the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So, so the town was fortunate last year to have received a complete streets grant from MassDOT to construct a sidewalk about 1,500 feet long, as Nora mentioned, from Booth Drive to Canton Street. And the sidewalk is planned to be located on the south side of the roadway, which is on the right side of this initial image you see here. Just kind of an overall view of the project limits, showing the extent of Downey Street between the Downey School and Canton Street. The beginning of the project is highlighted there at Booth Drive on the westerly side of Booth Drive to tie into the existing sidewalk network that exists there today, and then extending, as I mentioned, about 1,500 feet to Canton Street, where it would provide a new crossing across Canton Street, where the end project location shown is at Metcalf Road. Some of the goals for the project, as I mentioned, this project was identified on the town's complete streets prioritization plan as a high priority PAD project when that plan was initially developed. It'll complete a missing link in the sidewalk network, particularly facilitating pedestrians from the Downey School, students walking to and from the Downey School, improving pedestrian safety and accessibility along this stretch of Downey Street, also facilitating recreational access to the Courier Reservation trail system. There's a gravel parking area on the south side of the roadway that accesses the Courier Reservation. The project is also envisioned to complement a future Canton Street corridor project, which is still in the early design phases, but that project is envisioned to have a sidewalk on one side of Canton Street and a shared use path on the other. So again, this segment would provide that link between those facilities that exist today. One of the overriding goals of the project, given that Downey Street and Canton Street are both designated scenic roadways, was to minimize tree and stone wall impacts. And then there's also a small bordering vegetated wetland on the side near the Courier Reservation. We certainly wanted to try to avoid wetland impacts in that area. So just jumping quickly through the design plans. Looking at the intersection of Booth Drive, introducing accessible curb ramps, again, to tie into that existing sidewalk network. Looking to construct a 5-foot wide cement concrete sidewalk separated from the roadway with vertical granite curb along that south side of the roadway. I should note on these plans that highlighted in green are the trees that are proposed to be removed as part of the project. The total number of tree removals is 34. 29 of those 34 are less than or equal to 12-inch, and 19 of those 34 are less than or equal to 8-inch. And there's a more detailed summary toward the end of the presentation of those particular trees. But as we head along the south side of Downey, continuous sidewalk, reconstructing or constructing accessible driveway aprons for any of those driveways that we cross, including the one residence just to the north of Booth Drive, and then the gravel parking area of the conservation land. Some minor drainage improvements, given that we're introducing vertical granite curb where none exist. Heading further north, should note that some of the measures that we've taken to, I guess, minimize and mitigate impacts, given that, again, it's a scenic roadway, looking to minimize impacts for within the buffer zone to wetlands, as well as trees in particular. The roadway in a couple of locations, we're proposing to narrow it slightly. Some of the constraints along that south side of the roadway include, as I mentioned, the trees, but also some utility poles that, in order to maintain accessibility on the sidewalk, looking to avoid those. So we took the opportunity to narrow the roadway slightly in a couple of locations to facilitate an accessible route past a number of trees and utility poles. Heading up toward the intersection with Canton Street, the topography here gets a little bit steeper. And again, another one of the measures that we used to minimize the impact to the number of trees was to utilize a modified rockfill slope, which allows us to go to a much steeper slope, particularly in the segment in the vicinity of the wetlands that you see just approaching Canton Street. Also utilizing deep post guardrail, which allows us to tuck the top of the slope in closer to the back of sidewalk, again, minimizing that encroachment of the TOA slope, which would directly impact the number of tree removals required as part of the project. As we get to Canton Street itself, introducing a new pedestrian crossing with high visibility crosswalk markings and pedestrian crossing warning signs, utilizing the existing traffic calming median that's there today to serve now as a pedestrian refuge island to allow pedestrians to cross halfway across Canton Street and then again look for traffic in the opposite direction and then cross the other half of Canton Street. And then providing a accessible landing on the north side near Metcalf Road. So as far as the tree impacts, obviously a primary concern of this hearing, given that it's a scenic road hearing and a combined tree hearing. The project is really fully committed to mitigating for tree impacts and really looking for direction from the board and the tree warden on to the extent of tree mitigation that would be required, and we're willing to include that in the final design. I should note we've been in front of the Conservation Commission to date, and they were really deferring final decision till after this hearing was held. I think their initial recommendation was for a potential of 10 replacement trees, which was based on a calculation of, I think there's roughly 4,500 square feet of disturbance within the buffer zone. And the calculation was to divide that by 450 square feet to determine the number of trees. So that would be an initial recommendation of 10 trees. Again, though, they were deferring a final recommendation until the board and the tree warden weighed in tonight. Let's see. So it's just a summary table of the total number of trees shown in tan are those smaller trees, 8-inch and below. Shown in blue are the trees between 8 and 12 inches. And then shown in green are those trees larger than 12 inches. So just those 5 larger than 12. Just kind of an overall timeline of the project, just to give you a sense of where we've been, where we're heading. Seeking planning board and tree warden endorsement this evening. I have a follow-up Conservation Commission meeting tomorrow night. And then if all goes well, hoping to proceed with final design within about a next month timeframe before proceeding to bidding really this spring, and then looking to construct the project over the next construction season, spring, summer of 23. And with that, I would conclude my presentation and look to the board for comment.
All right, thank you very much, John. Appreciate it. Karen Catroni, she's out here, right? Is there anything she would like to add to this presentation?
No, I went up. We actually continued because the commission wanted to have a site walk. We had a site walk the Saturday before the last So the commission can take a good look at all the trees in the area. And most of my commission did show up for that, so they should be prepared tomorrow night to make a decision.
Okay.
I
Great.
also have some photographs, if you'd like to see,
Oh.
that Karen took of some of the trees in the area. If you'd like me to share my screen so you can see those.
Sure.
That'd be great.
More context is always welcome.
This is just to kind of give you a flavor of this side of Downey Street. So this is Downey Street looking towards the Downey School. Canton Street is at my back in this photo. You can see a little stream running to the left, and you can see the trees behind the guardrail as you proceed up Downey Street. So there are a significant number of trees there, some of them quite small, others larger. Down. This is a picture of a particularly large tree. This tree is at the start of the project up near Booth. And this is a large tree. You can see the ribbon around it, showing that this is one that's proposed for removal. It's right up against the roadway. This is a close-up of that tree, showing scars on the tree near Booth Street. Another close-up tree photo of the same tree, showing a crevice in this tree. And I think that's it. So those are just a couple of sample pictures that the tree warden took today.
Okay. Thanks, Nora. Board members, questions or comments for the applicant? Ellen, yes.
Hey there. First of all, thank you for the presentation. And just for everybody's information, I have been attending the Conservation Commission meeting, so I've been kind of paying attention to the conversations there, not just amongst the board, but there have been residents that had gone to those meetings, not understanding that some of the trees were under the jurisdiction of the Concom because they're in the wetland. Some of the trees were more like us and the tree warden because they're street trees. So there were some conversations around some trees like that tree we just saw the photo of, which came up at Conservation Commission, but really wasn't anything that they could make any decisions about. So my first question is actually about that particular tree. Is that the 3-foot diameter tree?
Yes, it is. And as the image that Nora showed illustrates, that tree's been significantly limbed up completely on one side for overhead utility clearance. And there are some health issues with that particular tree, but that's the 36-inch diameter right near the conservation access.
What type of tree is it?
It's an oak. I'm not sure what variety.
Okay. I know that tree in particular, there were residents who came to the Conservation Mission speaking, advocating to save it, which is why I'm asking these questions. And my inclination, has a certified arborist taken a look at it and said, this tree is, because sometimes a tree looks like it's not doing so well. And in my experience, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not doing well. So I appreciate the photos, but unless a certified arborist has said that tree is going to die, I'm not convinced that it's appropriate to remove it, particularly when there's resident interest in maintaining it and potentially incorporating it into the design, either grading it and working the sidewalk around it. Or I'm not the designer, but I've heard a lot of conversation around that tree in particular, given its location and its size. So that's helpful. Thank you. I would advocate, unless it's been deemed unsalvageable by a certified arborist, I would advocate for finding ways to leave it where it is. And I remember the conversation around doing the calculations around buffer zone disturbance to replace trees. I think 10's a good start, but those calculations would only apply to the trees that are in the wetland buffer zone. It's not necessarily accounting for some of the street trees that weren't part of the total 35. So I think I'd like to hear some math around how we figure that out to incorporate some of replacement of some of the street trees that couldn't be worked around as well. And my other question wasn't about trees. Surprisingly, you mentioned there was some talk of a plan to narrow part of Downey Street. My question is, what is the current width and what are you proposing to narrow it to at those points?
Yeah, the width along Downey varies between the curb to curb or the edge of pavement to edge of pavement width between 24 and 28 feet today. Those particular segments, which are again relatively short segments, but looking to narrow those to 10-foot lanes with 1-foot shoulders, so it's 22-foot total width at those constrained areas.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ellen. Any other comments or questions from board members? Yes, Kate.
Thank you. I just wanted to appreciate the plan and the work that's gone into this. I'm very excited that the town is able to take advantage of another Complete Streets program. It's part of what keeps people able to get around in Westwood and enjoy everything that it has to offer. And I do appreciate the difference between the trees affected because of being near the wetlands and then the tree streets. And I'm curious if we're using the shoulder for sidewalk, are we able to replant along the street, or must those replacement trees go into not along the street?
Yeah, so I guess, so when you say you were using the shoulder, you mean the unpaved shoulder
Yes,
for the
thank you.
sidewalk,
Yes.
right? Okay, so there is, in some areas, there would be room behind the sidewalk to place a tree within the public right of way. In other areas, as I mentioned, the conservation land is there. There could potentially be the option if the town, since the town controls the conservation land, if the commission allowed us to plant trees on that conservation land behind the sidewalk, it would allow a little more buffer to the sidewalk from new trees. The only areas I would caution are within the project that would be very challenging to replace trees would be the really steep slope closer to Canton Street, where we're proposing that rock fill slope. Really not feasible to plant a tree within that rock fill, given the steepness of the slope, as well as just the logistics of that rock around the trunk of the tree and trying to create a tree well within that area. And it kind of defeats the purpose of the slope revetment to keep the slope from eroding away. So within the total project area, there's certainly opportunities to replace trees. Some of those may need to be on town property, not public right of way.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Any other comments or questions from board members?
If I could, Chris.
Yeah, Phil.
I just had a couple questions. What's the size of the calipers of the trees that were anticipated to be replaced? The screen share went a little quickly because I didn't quite get a chance to catch those. And then I just want to echo Ellen's comments regarding the large tree and her comments with respect to that.
I mean, typical trees that we would replace would be potentially like a 1.5 to 2.5 inch diameter. Certainly, there could be a potential to utilize slightly larger caliper, but obviously, the larger the caliper, the greater the expense of and the challenges of initially sourcing and planting those.
And just you don't have to pull it up on screen share again. The 5 that were sizable, I didn't catch the calipers on those. Because if we're talking 1.5 to 2.5,
yeah,
obviously it's a cost, but it's also, I think, a disparity in terms of what's going in and what's coming out.
Understood. So yeah, the trees that are larger than 12 inches, there's a 15 inch, a 20 inch, a 24 inch, a 36 inch, and a 16 inch.
So some pretty sizable trees, 5 sizable trees are coming out, but then there is a proposal for 10 replacement of 1.5 to 2.5.
I mean, that number 10, I think was an initial estimate based on, again, I think others have mentioned those that are within the wetland buffer zone. Certainly, we're not suggesting that 10 is sufficient necessarily for mitigation for the entire project, and again would look for the board or the tree warden's recommendation on the total number.
What would you recommend if you think 10 it may not be a mitigation for the entire project? I'd love to hear from you. You go first.
I mean, I don't think it's feasible to do, some communities have inch caliper total inch caliper policies, which I don't think is feasible here.
Well, I recognize, I mean, you have some that are pretty sizable, 20, 24,
Yeah.
36. I mean, those, I don't know that that is, you know, essentially an inch for inch replacement, but essentially you got to come up in terms of, and it may be cost, but you know, from my perspective, you're 1.5 to 2.5, where you have some pretty sizable ones that are coming out, needs to be considered.
Yeah, I mean, I think mitigating for those that are greater than 8 inch. I mean, in general, 8 inch, less than 8 inch or less are generally considered relatively small trees. I would say potentially mitigating for any of those greater than 8 inch, which would, I think, is a total of 15, would be reasonable.
And your proposal would be keeping it at the 1.5 to 2.5?
Yes.
How high would you be prepared to go on caliper? I'd like to hear from you first.
I guess I would have to look at what's readily available from a nursery. Off the top of my head, I have not really in my career specified trees significantly larger than the 2 inch caliper or 2.5 inch caliper.
Okay. That's all I have.
All right, thanks. Any other comments or questions from board members?
Yeah, I had a couple of last sort of logistical questions. So we're talking a lot about what is planned to be removed on that, I guess, south side of Downey Street going, I guess, towards Downey School. Have we looked at potentially the sidewalk on the opposite side, closer to Norfolk Golf Club?
Yeah, we did look at that as an alternative. There's a number of reasons why it was not selected. One of which is there's stone wall along that side that would be impacted. So it would sort of compound the scenic road aspect of the impacts. Many of the trees on that side are actually on average larger than the trees on the south side.
Okay.
There's less remaining tree canopy on the north side if we were to remove the trees that are there, whereas on the south side, you know, the Courier Reservation has a significant tree canopy that extends out, you know, away from the roadway. And then from a pedestrian safety standpoint, that would require us to, yeah, that would, a new mid-block crosswalk at Booth. So
Okay.
some of the considerations.
Yeah, no, I think that's important for people to hear and understand that you guys actually looked at that, right? This wasn't just, hey, we're going to do this, and we haven't looked at all the options. I guess the other thing for me is not that it's a super aggressive timeline, but like we're just hearing about this now, and you want to like kick off for the not too distant future. Why now? Why didn't we hear about this sort of before? There was at least one continuance, wasn't there? Because of the delayed posting? Was that what it was?
Yeah, so I mean, the project has sort of proceeded on a typical time frame. Once this town was under contract with MassDOT for the grant, got TEC under contract, then we got survey done, field survey, and then proceeded with preliminary design, and then looked to schedule this. So basically, that's sort of what set the time frame to date. You know, the desire to bid basically as soon as possible is really just to try to take advantage of the off season when contractors are eager for work, looking for work, hopefully get lower bid prices. It certainly could be bid later if necessary. The duration of the construction we wouldn't expect is going to take the entire spring or summer. So it could potentially be delayed, but in our opinion, delaying it would increase the bid prices that we would see. Okay.
And sorry to harp more on the logistics part of it, but what I know you talked a little bit about like the future plans to connect this to a further development of Canton Street. You know, that being said, you know, these are scenic roadways. Were there other areas in the town that were evaluated as part of this grant, or did we specifically pinpoint this area? And I guess the second part of that is like, how much above and beyond the grant is going to be allocated? Do you happen to know?
So yeah, this project was so there were a number of, I don't recall off the top of my head how many projects were on the Complete Streets prioritization plan, but this one was one of the relatively high ranking projects on that plan. Mm-hmm. So it was selected as a preference by I believe DPW made that direction that it's been a long time coming to finish that connection to Downey School. But as far as what was the question you asked about the cost?
Yeah, the second part, how much above and beyond the grant is it going to impact the town? Do you happen to know? Will the grant cover 100% of this project?
No, at this point, we don't anticipate it given the escalation in prices that we've seen. On the order of 100 to 150K, depending on how bid prices come in.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, Ellen, you still have your hand up. Another question or comment?
Actually, yeah, because that conversation just spawned another question, and this may not be a question that anyone here has an answer for, but given that there's going to be an overage, do you happen to know whether or not that's something they're going to find within budget, or is that something that is potentially not within budget and is going to be brought forward as some sort of other means of financing?
My understanding from initial conversations with DPW was that they did have a source of funding already allocated that was available for that purpose, and it wouldn't be a need for another funding request.
That's helpful. Thank you.
John, could you bring up the plans again?
Sure.
I was curious if you could articulate what the dimensions is of the right of way.
Yep. The right of way width is 50 feet. I think I can zoom in a little bit here. Yeah, so the right of way width is 50 feet. I don't know. Can you see my cursor or no?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the far edge on the north side. The southern edge is right along here.
Okay. So it's 50 feet from the other side of the street.
Correct. Way up.
So it may vary a little bit.
Yeah, the roadway is perfectly centered. Yeah.
Okay. And where in this road are you proposing to narrow it?
This segment right here, just south of Downey Terrace, is one segment. It's only about 150 feet long that would propose to narrow it to that 10-foot lanes and 1-foot shoulder. So it's on the straightaway here. The rest of it remains a minimum of 11-foot lane.
Okay. And there's no issue with fire or safety navigating through there?
No, given the relatively small volume on Downey Street, we're not concerned about that. Given again, as I mentioned, this is on the narrowing portion is on a tangent section, on a straight section of the roadway.
Okay. And all of the trees that we're talking about tonight are under our purview, which are those trees in the right of way, right?
There's one that's outside the right of way, an 8-inch tree on Canton Street, one right near the crosswalk here. And then there's another one that basically a 24-inch tree that basically splits it's centered on the layout line. So half in, half out of the public right of way.
Okay. And I don't mean to be nitpicky, but do we have joint authority on the 24, or how does that work officially? We are responsible for those trees in the right of way. So Karen, do you have any insight as to how that one 8-inch tree and half the 24-inch tree, how do we just rule on all of it? And because that's part of the project? You're muted, Karen.
The tree that's half out, in and half out, I believe that's a street tree. If any
Okay.
part of the trunk is in the right of way, it's a street tree.
Okay.
I believe it's also not only if any part of the trunk, but if a significant part of the overarching branches are within the right of way, it's considered to be a tree within the public right of way and subject to scenic road approval.
Okay. All right. So essentially, and that 8-inch tree that's not, our vote would not have any impact on that tree, right? That he mentioned up by Canton Street.
So none of the trunk is in the right of way.
That's what John said.
Correct. Yeah.
So that would not be a tree.
Okay.
But that's in the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission, I believe.
Right. And what are the trees being considered for removal from the conservation's point of view? This is prepared for us, right? How many trees are being considered for the conservation removal?
So I don't know what the count is on that, but those would be the trees within 100 feet of the wetland. The wetland is closer there to the Downey Canton Street corner.
Okay. John, do you have a number on that?
I don't have a count off the top of my head. The 100-foot wetland buffer is this slightly thicker line that circles around here. So it's the majority, I would say. There's probably 7 or 8 that are outside of that.
Okay. And can you go over again the math and how you came up with the tree replacement policy? You said it once during the presentation. I didn't quite catch it all.
The 10-to-1 ratio on the impacts within the buffer. Yeah, so I wasn't able to find within the town's wetland bylaw where that calculation came from. I did see an example in some notes on the commission's website of that calculation having been applied to prior project or projects. But it was for every 450 square feet of disturbance within the wetland buffer zone, there shall be a 10-to-1 replacement policy. So we have 4,500 square feet divided by that 450 would equal roughly 10 trees.
Okay.
That was a policy that was created by the former chairman of the Conservation Commission.
Okay. Okay, so there's a possibility we could be looking at altering that math, or at least that equation for this particular project. It sounds like this particular board has some appetite for reviewing that formula. I don't want to speak for anybody, but I did hear some concerns about that number of 10. Okay. Any other comments or board member questions from board members that may have come up?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. You're the only one I can't see. Kate, go ahead.
That's okay. Thanks. So I did just want to mention this project is not new. It's been being pursued by Todd Korchin and DPW for certainly more than a year. It's just being brought forward at this point because it's ready to be brought forward, but it's something that's been the town has been hoping to do for a long time. Where the town always wants to pursue opportunities to make routes safe for children and families to get to and from, especially schools, and to each other within the town. So this is consistent with the work that the DPW has been doing, for decades. It's just that it's ready to be before us now. It's not new, and also. It's been being planned. So we could certainly go to the DPW and ask them how much it's going to cost them, but it has been part of the plan from the DPW to execute this project. So I don't believe anything, we could talk about finances if we want, but I think it's a little not the best use of our time because Todd has that well in hand, I'm sure.
All right, thanks, Kate. I believe we started this was Forbes Road the first street in Westwood to get this grant, like maybe 7-8 years ago? Does that sound right, Nora? Do you recall?
There may have been a grant on around Martha Jones as well. I don't recall. Okay. I remember, but that was going back 15 years.
Okay, all right.
I remember the same program.
Forbes to help with foot traffic to the Downey School as well. There's a cut through from one neighborhood to another to allow kids to not have to walk down Canton Street. Okay. Any other information people would like to hear from the applicant? I do have a couple questions in the Q&A. Yeah, Phil, you have a question? Comment?
That was Josh. I just have one last question. Any anticipated impacts to private property trees that the town might have to worry about in terms of like impacting root systems or anything else like that?
No, I mean, I wouldn't, unless you consider the trees on the conservation property to be private. I mean, they're outside the public layout, but
Yep. Nope.
there are shrubs at the residential property just north of Booth that will be impacted, and those are proposed to be replaced in kind.
Okay, great. So we did do that evaluation of any private property impacts that we'll have to replace as part of the project.
Correct.
Great.
John, can you pull up the plan again where the large tree happens to be by Booth? So so right there on the parking area for the Courier Reservation.
Correct. That gravel parking area.
Okay. And how wide are these sidewalks going to be?
It's 5 feet wide plus the width of the curb itself, so it close to 5.5 with the curb included.
Okay. And is some other board member had brought up, or maybe a couple had brought up about navigating around this tree? Is that something that is feasible? Is it logistically feasible?
It's logistically feasible from a technical standpoint. Property rights come into play there, given that in order to get a route around the tree, behind the tree, the sidewalk would have to go outside of the public right of way into the Courier Reservation property. I'm not sure what rights would be needed there, from whether the town would need to grant itself an easement, or certainly Conservation Commission would have to weigh in potentially on use of that parcel for that purpose.
Okay. And I think a question had been asked about the current state of the tree. It didn't look great to me in those pictures, but do we have anything official from anybody as to the health?
We have not had a certified tree arborist review the trees. I believe it was reviewed by the tree warden, certainly, and she can speak to her opinion of the condition. But
I guess my knee-jerk thought is it would be a shame to have to go through a whole lot only to have a very old tree that it doesn't appear to be in good health just fail, and now it's going to be cut out anyway in 2, 3, 5 years time. I don't know how long it would be, but that's a thought I have, is you're making accommodations for one tree right in the middle of where you'd like to go. That's my first thought. It would be, I don't know, a shame to go through all of that to involve private property or conservation land and all of that to only eventually cut it down just because maybe the added attraction of a sidewalk may not be healthy for the root system around it, or kids passing by hitting it with a lunchbox repeatedly, something like that. I don't know. These are thoughts that are going through my head about is it worth saving? I get that people want to save trees, but we do want to keep this a safe place for the kids to get to and from school, which obviously is the impetus behind this whole project.
If I could just speak to that, Karen.
Yeah. Sure.
So if you look at that tree, the street side of the tree is totally been cut out. It's because of the wires. And if you put the sidewalk around that tree, you're going to impact the roots on the side that's healthier than the. It's my fear that the tree would be greatly impacted by the sidewalk going around.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions for, Ellen?
That's fair, and I get that. I actually root management has been a topic in my personal life recently, so I absolutely understand what you're saying, and I understand that the impacts, and it's hard to minimize impacts to a tree, particularly a tree that's already potentially suffering. I guess in that case, if it's deemed not really salvageable, then I would definitely want to have some conversations about replacement of, a 36-inch diameter tree, not necessarily 1-for-1, because I get it. I understand that that's not really the most sensible way to replant, but I think for me, then 10 trees in replacement is definitely not enough. So I definitely have an appetite to discuss that, the math there further before kind of signing off on the condition.
Okay, thank you. Any other members? Phil, yeah.
I'm just curious, why no arborist? Why, if the and we support the Complete Streets program, but if it's been in the queue for a good period of time, and particularly given the number of trees that we're dealing with, how come we didn't get a certified arborist weighing in?
I mean, it's certainly an option too. Wasn't included within our proposal. Given that the majority of trees along this corridor are relatively small, this particular tree, to my non-arborist engineering eye, did not appear to be in the best condition or necessarily the most aesthetically pleasing, given the significant pruning that has happened to it, entirely on one side of the tree for the, as I mentioned, for the utilities. So I guess we didn't necessarily see the value in the cost of an arborist in association with the design of this project, given those factors.
And I think the board is sensitive to the timing also, because we're in February, we're looking, the spring is around the corner, and I certainly get that you want to move expeditiously, but we're kind of we're looking at photographs of trees and then kind of supposed to give our best guess as to the health, and that's hard to do at times. So I echo Ellen in terms of if this large tree is going to be negatively impacted, I'm of the opinion that the 10 replacement needs to be reconsidered.
Karen, we had tree removal on Canton Street recently, and we had one or two others recently too. Did we solicit arborist opinion in those? I can't recall.
The one at 170 Canton Street, we did.
Okay, and what about the, I can't recall where the other ones were.
The other
we had
ones,
some recently.
the other ones you did not.
Okay.
You had some on Sandy Valley Road. You did not request an arborist.
Chris, if I may,
Yeah.
I just want to throw out there, I'm all for saving trees. Like, I don't want to cut down trees, and I don't want to do that. But if we were asking the question, would we plant a tree there today, knowing what we know now, that it's going to be a very busy street, and that it's and that if it grows to its full potential, it will have the issues that it has now. I don't think we would choose to put a tree there. The tree that is there, I agree that, I'm not an arborist, obviously, but it would be vulnerable to even more difficult circumstances when this sidewalk goes in. So I'm more inclined to look at the condition it's in now and say that we could let the project move forward. Also knowing that a safer sidewalk is a straight sidewalk that does not go around any obstacles. The safest sidewalk is straight. So I appreciate people wanting to get more information. I don't personally need more information about this particular tree. I am a little more interested in the math. And then the question I haven't asked is, where will the replacement trees go? Maybe you've answered that, and I was not paying enough attention, but where would replacement trees go?
Yeah, I think we would look for opportunities behind the proposed sidewalk between Booth and the limiting point to the north is roughly Downey Terrace. So potentially opportunities behind the proposed sidewalk in that stretch. We could also look at the opposite side of the road where there may be a little more right-of-way available to plant those replacement trees. And then tomorrow night, certainly with the Conservation Commission, again, we can, are they willing to allow the replacement trees to be planted within the Courier Reservation property, or would they prefer that those remain in the public right-of-way?
Great, thank you.
I mean, John, I think that makes a lot of sense. If you already said that other side was pretty sparse, the only, I guess, concern I would have is that they would be shaded by the other larger trees. But I mean, that seems to encourage the scenic roadway, tree canopy, as well as, sort of reforest the same exact area that we're impacting. So if that could occur, I think that makes a lot of sense.
So from what I've heard, it sounds like this particular board is interested in moving forward, but would like to identify a right number for replacement trees. I understand that some members have more interest or deeper interest of saving that one particular tree, but it's not, from what I heard, it sounded like they would be amenable to removing that tree if we could come up with a different number for replacement. I don't want to mischaracterize anyone's sentiments or statements, but we do want to keep moving forward, not at the expense of the project, but we want to give everyone an opportunity to articulate their concerns. We do have some questions in the Q&A, but as a board, I think we owe it to the applicant to come up with action items that we can address. And I think we can address these tonight. I don't think we have to wait for more information if we're looking to come up with a better number, a number that we're more comfortable with for replacement trees. So unless people have, if I've got it wrong, please tell me now. Again, I can't speak for everyone, but I do have an interest in keeping this moving forward. And I do want to address the people in the audience with the Q&As that are typed, and anyone that wants to ask a question verbally. So with that, I can either take the Q&As now, or we can try to talk about a different approach to the math for replacement trees. Yeah, Kate.
So I'm just curious if Ellen has a number in mind.
That's a tough question. Because I think that the formula that applies to the buffer zone isn't going to work for us, because we're not talking about square feet of disturbance of land. I'm thinking in terms of, that's a big old tree. Like if it's 3 feet in diameter, it's well over 100 years old. So how do you replace that? And I get it. If it truly is failing and will continue to fail, I understand that. Everything has its season, right? If that's not the case, that's another story, but we have to go with the information we're given, right? So as far as replacement, like, I think asking for 36 inches replacement caliber is a lot, but I don't know. I don't know. Maybe Karen could advise us on what might be reasonable. I mean, obviously I'm going to ask for as much as I can get, because even if it's in 2-inch caliper trees, that's what I would look for, but I don't know what's reasonable. I'd look to someone else with more expertise to advise on that.
I'm just, as we're talking through this, I think the pictures could be a good reminder. We're not talking about a desolate area void of all trees. It's quite heavily wooded just beyond this right-of-way area. So even finding areas, and maybe John, you can speak to this, where new 1 to 2 inch trees can thrive might be difficult to in that area to fight for sunlight. So I don't know if we have other pictures that might show that conservation area off of Downey Street, but and I didn't mean to cut whoever was about to answer off. I apologize.
Sorry, to follow up on that, Chris, and I'm glad you said that. What had come up at conservation as well is, and I would support this, for me, it doesn't necessarily, the replacement trees, I don't think for me it would be right to reduce the number just because we can't put them there. I think there are other spots, specifically in Islington, that we could find places to put replacement trees. So for me, they wouldn't necessarily have to be along the route of this project. I think I'd rather have more trees. There are other places that would benefit from them. And I would advocate for those replacement trees specifically to go to Islington as well. That's my thought.
Okay. And I cut off, you asked a question of Karen. And Karen, if you were trying to answer, I apologize if I cut you off.
No, that's okay. That's okay. So the commission has always used that form. We've used that formula for probably 10 years now. And you don't want to just pack trees in that area. So maybe Ellen's ideas could work. I know that DPW did agree to the 10 trees that the commission had requested. So I don't know, John, if you have any numbers that you've spoken to Todd about other than the 10?
No, he hadn't suggested any other trees. I think he just said that to reiterate to the board, similar to what we had discussed with the conservation, was that really fully committed to mitigating for the tree impacts based on what the board believes is appropriate in this case. And to Ellen's point, I was going to also kind of echo that the commission did discuss the possibility of purchasing trees for planting elsewhere, or potentially contributing funds to a tree replacement fund. So another option also.
Yeah, and if you do, 1 second, Phil, if you do look further down Downey Street, I mean, there are plenty of spaces that there are no trees at all on that right side too. So you can just go into Google Maps real quick, and there are plenty of spots that we could fill in with smaller trees and help fill out that canopy. So, and to Ellen's point, and John, absolutely, like a tree fund and stuff like that, I think makes complete sense. And I think it would make a lot of people on the board and probably on watching and listening feel a little bit better as well.
I think the balance is also caliber. I think you can't just stay with the 1.5 to 2.5. I fully support Ellen's position on looking at other places or the tree fund. But I think also you have some significant trees that are in the queue, and at least some designation of whether it's 5 or something that is a larger caliper than what we're just considering, I think would be appropriate.
I could just point out, if this was a new street that was being constructed and it was within the planning board's purview under a subdivision approval, you would be looking at street trees approximately every 30 feet, and those street trees would be required to be 4 inches in caliber. So maybe keeping that in mind, look at how many gaps are there in the street and use that to assess how many trees are needed.
Is that something we could do tonight, Nora? Assessing the street gaps?
Well, if we could have a calculation, John, I think looking at your plan, you could, does it show enough detail on the other side of the street where the existing trees are that you could calculate any gaps that are significantly larger than 30 feet?
Yes, we do have all the trees on the opposite side were surveyed as well, given that we knew we wanted to evaluate the feasibility of a sidewalk on that side. So we do have the ability to determine where there are gaps available.
So maybe while we're taking some comments from residents who are interested in commenting on this application, maybe John, you could do a rough calculation and see where you might recommend trees on that other side of the street, keeping in mind that if it's outside the right of way, we would have to coordinate with the property owner and see if they were amenable to putting trees there, but at least you would be able to come up with a number.
Right, okay.
And then, although the board's regulations do require trees to be 4 inches in caliper, in most recent applications over the last 15 years, the board has waived that requirement down to 3 to 3.5 inch caliper. And they've done that because it's been demonstrated over time that if you plant a tree at 3 inch caliper, 5 years later, plant a tree at 3 inch and a tree at 4 inch, and then wait 5 years, the tree you planted at 2.5 to 3 inches will be a larger tree. So that's the reason you do allow trees to be a little bit smaller than your requirements. But I think that's something you have to look at the site where it's going and determine what would be the appropriate tree size there. Did you want to
Karen,
take comments?
Yeah, I do. I just have one more question for Karen. Karen, is the 10 from conservation what they're looking for, or are they waiting to hear from us on a tree number?
So they agreed on 10.
Okay.
There are a couple of members that wanted more, but the majority of the members agreed to that.
Well, as I think about, if 4 inch caliper was our size, I know, Nora, you just said we go down sometimes. That's 9 trees at 4 inches puts us at that 1 tree removal. If we asked to put in 20 trees, conservation has 10, planning board has 10. Does that get us to where we need to be? And I'm just throwing it out there for someone to shoot down or not. Just thinking out loud. Maybe that's the right way to go. I don't know. But anyway, I will go. We do have 8 questions in the queue, so I'm just going to read them in the order that they came in, and then we'll go out to the attendees, to anyone who has a question they would want to ask verbally. First is from Debbie Conant. I missed the sidewalks presentation and curious as to the width of the sidewalks, especially around that bend heading toward Canton from Downey. I think I heard John, you say 5 feet. Is that a consistent width and plus the granite curb?
It's the typical width. In a couple of spots, it increases to 6 feet to allow enough clearance past the utility pole for accessibility purposes,
but no less than 5?
Correct.
Okay. And then she asked a question again, Debbie Conant. Curious as to the grant amount we received and how much over is anticipated to construct. John, I think you articulated $150,000.
Yeah, the grant was for $357,000.
Okay, so this is 150 in addition to that, correct?
Roughly, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we're factoring in a contingency and such.
Okay. She asked another question from Debbie Conant. This question is for Nora. At town meeting, a portion of money was voted on to allocate to this project. Wasn't it $750,000?
So I don't recall the actual vote that was taken at that meeting, but I'm just calling up the annual town meeting book from last year. And I see that there's an amount listed for fiscal year 23 capital requests. There's one amount of $285,000, which includes 4 items, one of which is the Downey Street sidewalk from Booth to Canton at $75,000. So that was included in the budget book for $75,000.
Yes, I apologize. I misread Debbie's question. She did say 75,000, not 750,000. So that's
right. Could
on
I
me.
just interrupt for a second? So Debbie and anyone else who's making comments, can you just add your address in the chat? We need that for the record.
Okay. So Debbie, if you could just add that into the Q&A, please, your address. Next is from Fran Fusco at 20 Pine Lane. I'm no street designer, but I can't imagine having concrete sidewalks with granite curbing at the Canton to Downey to Booth to connect with asphalt sidewalks after Booth, how awful this will look. Also, has Westwood Fire Department been involved in talks with narrowing of Downey Street? I think I asked that question about fire and safety, about the narrowing of the road. John said that has not come up as a problem. Is that right, John? Has that question been asked and answered?
Yeah, I think we addressed that question.
Okay. And then her other comment, I guess it's more of a concern or a statement. So she's asking about, this is a concrete sidewalk and then it's going to attach to an asphalt. Will it physically attach or will it go across Booth and then become asphalt?
Yeah, it will not physically attach. So the concrete portion will be on the northern side of Booth and the existing asphalt is on the south. Is
there a reason for differing materials?
I can't speak to why the existing sidewalk is asphalt, but DPW's current preference is to construct cement concrete sidewalks wherever feasible, given the durability of that material.
And she asks another question. Do we know how many children today would be walking to school from Canton Street to Downey School? It's a very dangerous area with or without sidewalks. Has that research been done? Do we know?
No, we didn't do a pedestrian count. Again, when you build sidewalks, typically more people walk than do today also. So it's tough to project how much use that will get. But I would say between the school and the conservation property, it would be a substantial increase in the number of walkers there.
Debbie Conant asked another question. Another concern is the impact of the beauty of the canopy of trees as you drive down Downey. This will be significantly impacted. This will not be able to be replicated again. So that's a concern she has. I don't know if there's something you can speak to that. Is the canopy largely from the trees that are looking to be removed? Or, I mean, most of them are below 8 inches, right? So I don't know, the canopy, is that mostly the trees on the golf course side? I can't recall. Maybe the pictures would help that, but anyway, she's speaking to the canopy effect. I have 2 questions in a row Okay. That one picture looked like it might have had some insight.
I mean, this can give you an idea of what the tree canopy is. You know, the majority of these trees
Yeah, it looks like the
on the
tree,
north
the
side.
road is being covered by trees from the golf course side. Largely, anyway, not entirely, but based on that picture, to me, it looks, looking at, you can see the total road on the left side under the word project.
Yeah, I mean, I think the impact would be, I guess, most noticeable right up near Canton Street, where a small band of the trees on the south side here will be removed. However, it should be noted that the majority of trees in this area that are being removed are the much smaller ones, and the tree canopy that's depicted here are from the larger trees toward the bottom of the slope here.
That are remaining.
Correct. So in my opinion, not a significant impact to the tree canopy, given the substantial number of trees abutting Downey on the north side and then on the Courier Reservation.
Okay, and I have two questions from someone labeled as Galaxy J3V. Question is, will the removal of the 36-inch oak tree impact the structural integrity of Downey Street? I guess they're speaking more to the root system, and once removed, what would that do to Downey Street pavement?
And I'll just point out, we need an address and a full name for
Yeah.
Galaxy J3B before we answer the question.
Okay, Debbie Conant did put her address in at the bottom there. Okay, and I'll read the question, but I guess we won't answer until we get an address for identification of Galaxy J3V. What species are being specified? Red maple is not suitable adjacent to walks since the root system will heave and buckle pavement. So when we get an address there, we'll craft an answer. I think that is it for the typed in Q&A questions. And John, if you could stop sharing your screen, then I can see the people in it as attendees. And somebody has their hand up. And
Paul Higgins.
Paul Higgins. Okay, thank you. I just couldn't see that. Paul, would you should we give him the opportunity to speak?
Sure. Paul, you may speak.
Hello, sir.
Hi, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Okay, this is Rachel Higgins.
Hi.
24 Phillips Brooks Road, and I'm questioning, what is the future of the Downey School? I thought that I heard rumors that there's going to be a regional elementary school, and if the Downey School is not going to be long-term in the neighborhood, what is the need for the sidewalks? And will we be removing bus transportation if we have sidewalks, or will it still be an option? In my opinion, I've lived here for 30 years and we don't see a lot of walkers to the Downey School. There's a million cars. Over the pandemic, there's been some walking, but I think that's just because people are working from home. And the other question is, are we going to need steel pilings to support the sidewalks? It's a very steep drop off, and what's the effect on the water? Have we had an environmental engineer tell us what the effect would be on the conservation in that waterway? And one more question. There's a guardrail at the top of Downey and Canton Street. That's to protect the cars from going off that steep down turn, you know, if they slipped on the ice. I assume that's why it's there. Would it still have to be there to protect, you know, walkers from cars that are turning that corner? That corner is very dangerous as cars pull in. They come in, you know, they don't go all the way to the right side of the road when they're coming in. They cut the corner. And then when there's ice, it's very, very dangerous.
John, can you speak to those questions, concerns?
Yeah, so I'll take them out of order. So the guardrail will be replaced. It'll be located behind the new sidewalk to protect vehicles from the steep slope. As far as water quality, so there's no treatment of the stormwater runoff today. So we're introducing a small closed drainage system, which will consist of a deep sump catch basin to take some sediment out of that stormwater before it outlets over land, and then has the opportunity to infiltrate between that point and the wetlands. So all that stormwater improvement is happening outside of the wetland and the buffer zone, but it will represent an improvement to the stormwater quality along this stretch of the road.
And what about the future of the Downey School? I mean, are we still going to have a Downey School in the future? And do we need a sidewalk if we don't have a Downey School?
So I think that's probably more of a question for the school committee, but there are no imminent plans to stop using the Downey School. It's a much needed school for our community.
And what about transportation to the Downey School? Are we going to eliminate buses when we put sidewalks in and require students to walk to the Downey School?
Again, that's a question for the school committee. If they choose to eliminate buses and increase their walker route, that's not something that's in the purview of the planning board or the tree warden.
Okay. My concern is that the whole character of the neighborhood is changing. You know, you've got the Amazon warehouse that's gone in here, and sidewalks and crosswalks going in, I think is going to really change the rural nature of the neighborhood and the town itself. So that's why I'm concerned.
Okay. Thank you very much for your questions and comments. We did have an addition of the address and the identification of Galaxy J3V. It's Chris O'Brien at 175 Alder Road. So we'll get back to speaking of the oak tree. John, can you talk about the structural integrity of Downey Street once that tree is removed?
Yeah, so given the pruning that's occurred to that tree over the years, it's tough to say how far the substantial root system extends toward Downey Street itself. Typically, the roots don't grow out under roadways if the roadway's been there long enough and the tree's been there long enough. However, when the root system is removed as part of the project, if there's any indirect damage to the pavement, it would be repaired with full depth pavement.
And he's also asking what species are being talked about, I guess, considered for the replacement trees.
Yeah. So we'll evaluate which species are appropriate, particularly given that we're now looking at a more substantial number of replacement trees. So we'll be evaluating what are appropriate for roadside placement and placement next to sidewalks to ensure that the integrity of the sidewalk is not damaged as the tree grows.
Chris, if I could just mention,
Sure.
The commission will want native trees within their jurisdiction.
Okay. I think we would have a similar requirement. All right. I don't see any other additional hands raised or questions added to the Q&A. I'll give the board an opportunity if you've had any thoughts come across your mind while we're talking about this. And we have not decided on a number from this board of what we would like to see, in addition to the 10 that the Conservation Commission has requested.
Chris,
Or not in addition. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to go back to what someone was asking, a resident was asking about the busing thing. And I just wanted to mention that busing is available if you live at a certain distance from a school. If you live very close to the school, busing is not an option for you. And if there is no way to walk to the school, if there is no sidewalk, that is often when we see people driving. So it could be that you're not seeing people walking to school because there has not been a sidewalk. And people may appreciate seeing people walking to school. We may see more of it once the sidewalk is there. But I am sensitive to traffic, and I'm sensitive to the concerns about the way that this might feel different. I just wanted to mention. Thanks.
All right. Okay. Any board members with thoughts about the math problem that we've talked about? I don't want to limit it to just that, but it seems like that's our outstanding issue for this evening.
Chris, was your proposal 20 in addition to the 10?
No, it was 20 total.
20
was my
total?
first thought.
I'd kind of up it.
Okay, let's talk about it.
If we go larger caliber, I'd say 25 of the 4-inch as compared to the 10 that the 1.5 to 2.5. That's, I think, even if there are issues at this particular location, I think there's lots of other places that we could certainly do. I'd say 25 to 30.
John, have you been able to identify how many gaps we have and how many would be appropriate for replacement?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to gauge given in some areas the survey picked up a tree line, not individual trees, given the density of trees there. So presuming those areas are not viable locations. On the north side, I would say there's roughly 10 locations that would allow for approximately 30-foot spacing. So I think that wouldn't necessarily govern your determination of the total number. I think that we could look to place those 10 here, and then whatever surplus that would come out of your recommendation could be placed potentially in Islington, or as I think Ellen had suggested as a recommendation.
Nor is Islington an appropriate place for us to identify at this time, or is there just we have a
So what
tree.
I'd recommend, if you can reach a number of trees that you'd like, you could grant approval with the condition that 10 trees be placed on the north side of Downey Street to fill gaps in the tree exposure on that area. Any additional trees that can be placed on the south side of the street where the slope and the location of the sidewalk allows, you can pick a number that go there. And then any trees beyond that, from whatever number this board chooses, you could request the submission of a landscape plan or a landscape proposal for placement of trees at other locations somewhere in Islington, and then they can come back to the board and we can discuss where those trees are. And then I would also recommend that you have the Karen Skinner-Petroni, the tree warden, involved in the decision of what trees and where they would go. So I think you could leave that open, specify the number of trees, the size of the trees, but not the type and not the specific locations of those that are outside of the project area.
It seems to me to be a reasonable approach. How does the rest of the board feel?
I'd be amenable to that. I mean, I immediately said Islington because that's the neighborhood that's directly being affected by the tree removal on this project is in Islington. And I know there's been other, recent work in Islington that has resulted in a reduction in the tree canopy on the Islington side. But, I think as long as we find places that make sense at a later date and that, there's equity as far as distribution goes, I think I'd be fine with that. And I'm amenable to everything Nora just outlaid. I think it's very reasonable.
I echo, I think Nora's proposal is a good one. I think, we should focus on the number and try to get an agreement and move the project along.
Okay. Before we do that, I do see that there's a hand raised, and I can't recall her first name, but it's showing up as Paul Higgins. And I'm not sure if that's a Rachel. I don't know if that's a holdover from her first comment.
I don't believe it is. I believe her hand was down. So let me allow her to speak again. Rachel, you may speak.
No, I just submitted a comment that tree there that you say is failing is actually it's a beautiful tree, and it really adds a lot of character to that area. I cross-country ski through that walkway into the conservation land, and it's significant. And I'm wondering if it could be replaced with a, not the same size tree, but the same species out of the way of the sidewalk. Probably it would have to be on the property of the homeowner there. A significant, tree put there in replacement of that tree. And it wouldn't be in the same location. It would have to be outside of your sidewalk, but it should be replaced with something worthy of its destruction if you do have to destroy it.
I think that's a good idea. However, it's been articulated that once we move outside of our right of way, we encounter land that we don't have any purview over. So it could be private property or the conservation land. So the planning board can't dictate that trees be planted in those other areas. So just the right of way is what the planning board has access to. So I'm not sure if we lost Rachel or not.
No, it's just, I don't know.
That's
a shame. That's a shame. Maybe there is room within the public land to replace it. Is it on the public land, that tree? I mean, it looks like it's on private land, but I guess it's on the conservation land.
It's part of this project, right, for the sidewalk. So it's part of the right of way on the side of the street. But once we move off of that, then we're encountering other land.
Yeah. Well, I would just encourage the board to consider it.
Okay, thank you. I see another hand raised by Tony Mullen.
All right, Tony may speak.
Hello, are you there?
Hello. Yep.
Yes.
Hi, Anthony Mullen, 126 Pond, Westwood School Committee. I've got a few texts. I just want to clarify. I just got on. There's no plans to close the Downey School now, or there's no plans, at least as my knowledge, anytime within the foreseeable future. So I just want to address that because I'm not sure where that came from, but there's no plans to move to regional school. So.
All right. Thank you for clearing that up.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're back to the number. Nora had a very good suggestion, and I think once again it all comes down to a number that this board needs to be comfortable with. So I suggested 20 total. I think I heard Phil say 25 to 30 total. And I didn't hear any other numbers other than those two, I believe. So any other suggestions? Let's talk about those two numbers, 20 to 30 or 20 to 25.
How about 23? Prime number. Is that a prime number?
I think it is.
Yeah,
Yes.
prime number, 23. We get 12. They get 11.
Not to go down
Interesting.
rabbit holes, but I think for me, the number will depend on the caliper. If we're talking 2-inch caliper trees, like to the point about we require 4-inch for street trees. And again, that one tree is a big tree. I don't mean to harp on that, but it's one large organism that, you know, there's an impact felt by losing that. So if we get an agreement for a certain number of 4-inch caliper trees, I'd be okay with a fewer total number of trees. You know, I don't think it's necessarily just the number for me. I think it's the mix.
So from what John said, John, please jump in, that you saw about 10 spots on the north side. Those would all be 4-inch trees, right? Those are street trees. The 10
Presumably they could be, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I do want to sort of bring up that we are as a town also paying for the tree replacements as well. I mean, we could dictate 50 and we're going to pay for that, which there's benefit to as well. But like, we're also trying to be cognizant of cost as well. So yeah, I mean, I'm fine with 23. Sounds great, Kate.
Okay, so we had a 20, 22 23s, 25 to 30, and Ellen would like to discuss calipers as much as numbers.
I echo on caliper. I had actually said 25 to 30 on 4-inch. I'm okay with 20. I just if it's 4-inch, then we can probably, unless Ellen wants more, I'm okay with that.
To Josh's point, this isn't a private project. This is a town project. So I want to be reasonable all around. You know, like I think there's a balance between not costing the town ourselves a small fortune, but also doing the right thing. So I'm amenable to a reasonable number. If that's 20 total, with some in the mix, maybe 5 or so that are 4-inch caliper, and that's financially workable, I'm okay with that.
Okay, I think we're getting closer. All right. It seems like the sweet spot for this board, the number is, let's use Kate's 23. And Nora has said that we've allowed less than 4 because they've shown to be a more thriving size rate at 3 inches. You know, a 4-inch costs more and it's less likely to grow as much as a 3. So we're not just grabbing inches in caliper size. We want to make sure that, you know, whatever we do thrives. So That being said, we do have it in our bylaws, subdivision bylaws, that it's a 4-inch. So it's not out of the realm that we request a 4. So if we're going to use 23, again, I'm just going to make suggestions. How about 5 4-inch gets us to 18, 8 3-inch gets us to 10, and then the other 10 we can allow conservation to weigh in on their original 10. So we've done 13. A mix of 4 and 3, and then allow conservation to weigh in for the remainder 10 that they prescribed or last time they met, and I presume would prescribe again tomorrow. Does that seem reasonable? Some 4s, some 3s, and the rest, whatever conservation deems necessary. And then where they get planted, we would leave to Karen Skinner-Catroni and the species as well. Any board members?
I like that
with that?
proposal.
Chris,
Could you just
I'm good with that, Chris.
Could you repeat those numbers?
5 at 4
No.
calipers, 8 at 3 calipers, the other 10 for conservation.
Thank you. Because I don't know if I could come up with that again. It's just off the top of my head.
And we would be prioritizing filling in current gaps on Downey Street, correct?
Yeah, I think that, we would, I think that's logical. Yeah, I agree. And leave it to their discretion as to what would be appropriate in those gaps. We don't know what the canopy's like and what's the right thing there. So Nora, were you typing up draft language?
I am. I'll
Motion
show you
language?
when you finish speaking.
Yeah. Okay, we'll keep talking amongst ourselves. I don't see any other questions typed in and no other hands raised that I can see. If there are, I apologize. I'm not catching it, but I don't see any right now.
All right. Would you like to see a proposed draft motion?
Yes, please.
Can you see that screen?
Yes.
So
we
I
have
have,
two
I've written the
conditions?
first condition. I think I said approximately 35 trees. Did we say tonight it was 34 trees, Joan?
23.
20? No, I'm
No,
saying
Oh, sorry,
how many
sorry,
trees are
excuse
being
me.
removed.
Removal.
Wrong number.
Yeah, I believe the final count that we determined, I think one of them had already been removed by the time we went out to flag them, so.
Okay. All right. So the proposal that would have 2 conditions. The first would be the applicant shall provide a minimum of 23 replacement trees. 5 of these replacement trees shall be a minimum caliper size of 4 inches. 8 of these replacement trees shall be a minimum caliper size of 3 inches. And the remaining 10 trees shall be of a minimum caliper size specified by the Conservation Commission. Of those trees, 10 trees shall be planted within the public right-of-way on the north side of Downey Street. As many of those replacement trees as practical should be planted within the public right-of-way on the south side of Downey Street in areas that do not interfere with the proposed sidewalk installation. A proposal shall be submitted for planting the remaining replacement trees elsewhere in the Islington section of Westwood, which proposal shall be reviewed by the Westwood Tree Warden and approved by the Planning Board at a subsequent meeting. And then the next proposed condition is the board standard condition. If the project or any condition imposed in this decision requires permit, license, or other approval from any board or commission or any agency of the town of Westwood or other regulatory agency of the Commonwealth or the federal government, the applicant shall make an appropriate application for the same and shall obtain all required approvals prior to the start of any work. If any condition of such permit, license, or other approval from any board, committee, or agency is inconsistent with this decision, the applicant shall make application to the planning board for an amendment of this decision and the planning board shall consider such application in accordance with the requirements of MGL Chapter 40, Section 15C, the Scenic Roads Law, and all applicable planning board rules and regulations. Does that cover it? Would you like another condition about selection of species?
Yeah, I guess that is kind of open-ended at this point, right?
Mhm.
So that should be part of number one
Could I
or added to.
request that we say something like native species and, I don't know the right way to say it, but in line with the recommendations of the Conservation Commission. I think it should be cohesive. That's my feeling.
Nor after the word shall, you have we instead of be.
Thank you.
But we are in this together.
Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Works
I think
for
I'm
me.
okay with that. Yeah.
Yep. All right, so I need to read it.
You can just read the top part and say with the motions as previously read,
All right.
the conditions as previously read.
I move that the planning board in Westwood Tree Warden grant scenic road approval for removal of approximately 34 trees within the public right of ways of Downey Street and Canton Street, as described in the application therefore submitted to the planning board and filed in the office of the town clerk on December 20th, 2022, subject to the following conditions as previously read by the fabulous Nora.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote. Ellen,
Aye.
Josh,
Aye.
Phil,
Aye.
Kate,
Aye.
and I vote aye also.
And we also need a vote from the tree warden.
I vote in favor of the just announced motion.
All right,
Okay,
that's unanimous.
that's 6 in favor, unanimous.
And then
All right,
do
and
we
now we need a
move? I move we
motion to
close the
close the
public, motion to
Yeah.
close the hearing.
Second.
Any further discussion on closing the hearing? Take a roll call vote. Phil,
Aye.
Ellen,
Aye.
Kate,
Aye.
Josh,
Aye.
and I vote also aye.
Can't hear you, Jessica.
All right. What's that?
Does Karen need to vote to close it too?
Oh, sorry.
yes.
Good question.
Karen,
Okay.
could you
Karen,
vote
do
to
you want
close
to
the
close the
hearing?
hearing?
I vote to close the hearing.
Yes, thank you, Jessica.
All right. Yeah, thanks for chiming in. Missed that.
All right.
All right.
Moving
Thanks,
on.
Karen. Thanks, John.
Thank you
Alright.
so much.
Best of
Thanks, all.
luck.
Good night.
Have a good night.
Thank you very much.
night.
Thanks.
Good night.
All right, the next item on your agenda is a hearing for earth material movement at 748 Gay Street. Anyone who is in the, oh, sorry. I know John Glossa, yes. John Gillen, is there anyone else in?
I'm here.
Okay, is there anyone else you're looking to join you in this hearing? Any more
Can you hear me, Nora?
representatives of the applicant?
Can you hear me, Nora? Am I muted?
John, yes, very faintly.
Oh, hang on.
Sean Stewart, is he a member of
John
your party?
Stewart, Garrett Fitzgerald, and Mark Tomasello, if he is on the call.
Mark Tomasello, let me find him. Yes. All right, they've all been promoted to panelists.
Okay, I don't see my little thing that's going to let you see me, but maybe you don't want to see me.
You know what, I'm gonna put you
It's
back
okay.
and then take you in again. I think you only have permission to talk. Same with John, instead of being promoted, John Gillen, I'm gonna put you back and then promote you again. Let's see. All right, if you accept that promotion to panelist, we should be able to see you as well as hear you. All right, John, you're in.
Okay, I'm here. And as I said, well, first of all, my name is John Glosser, Glosser Engineering, 46 East Street in East Walpole. I am here representing the Stephen Siller Tunnel to Towers Foundation. So just quickly for anyone who doesn't know what that is, Stephen Siller was a firefighter who had just left work on September 11, 2001, and had driven to Long Island when the towers were attacked. And Stephen turned around and drove towards Manhattan. When he got to the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, the tunnel was closed to traffic, so he put on all of his firefighting gear and he ran to the towers. So thus the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. Unfortunately, Stephen was killed that day. But one of the things that the Tunnel to Towers Foundation does is they will purchase land, and in this case, a single family house lot, and they will build a house for disabled first responders and veterans and people who are the people who protect us day to day. And in this case, it's a wonderful man. His name is Garrett Fitzgerald, his wife and kid, one on the way, I believe. I'll just say to Garrett, or just say to the town of Westwood, you're getting a wonderful family, and they're very anxious to move into Westwood. We've been working on this. I think I've been working on this since 2020. And I would say to the town of Westwood, you're getting I would say to Garrett and his family, you're moving to a wonderful town. I always enjoy working in Westwood. It's a very organized town, has great schools, and just a great place I think to live, even though I live in Walpole. But so anyway, the lot in question, I can't share it, Nora, and so I don't know if you want to, but the lot in question is just to the left or just to the south of the Paul Hanlon School. So looking at this, the Paul Hanlon School would be on the right side as we're looking at the lot from Gay Street. And so it's lot 2B. It's 33,495 square feet. As I said, it's just to the left of the Paul Hanlon School. It has 92 feet of frontage on Gay Street. The lot right now, it's vacant. It's mostly wooded. It's somewhat level. It's elevation 174 or so at the front of Gay Street. It rises up to about 178. Where you can see the driveway turning into the proposed house, the proposed driveway turning into the proposed house. And then it drops down to about 168 at the rear where there's wetlands on the abutting property. There's also a small rise in the right front corner of the lot. And then there's a small rise in the left rear of the lot, about 200 feet or so back from Gay Street, and that's where the driveway to the proposed house, where the turnaround to the is going into the proposed driveway. So anyway, the proposal therefore then is to construct a single family house for Garrett and his family. The front of the house is about 150 feet back from Gay Street. There'll be a paved driveway you can see in sort of that darker brown color that'll lead to a two-car garage at the rear of the house. And then, so the grading around this house, the driveway is going to rise up to the front of the house, and then obviously at the rear, that driveway is at the elevation of the garage. So all of that elevation on the left side is about at the elevation of the proposed house. On the right side, you can see that dark black line. Can you zoom in a little bit, Nora, by any chance, to just around the house? So if you see that sort of dark black line, it's creating a little bit of a rectangle right there, yes. So that would be at the level of the first floor of the house. And then behind that, and that's why that's shown as a retaining wall, that'll actually be at the level of the basement of the house, where there'll be a patio, and then that sort of hatched walkway going, or that hatched area going all the way around from the rear of the house to the front of the house is a compacted gravel path that will allow Garrett to go from the basement elevation up to the driveway, and then also from that basement elevation up to the front of the house. So there are two major factors that sort of drive the need to have more than 5 feet of fill in certain areas on this lot. And one of them is, and I think they're finding this out at the Hanlon School, I think I did about 8 or 10 test pits at this lot, and most of them ended in ledge. It's not real shallow, but it's somewhat shallow. So the ledge in some instances a little bit more than 5 feet down, in other instances 7, 8 feet down. So the ledge in test pit 5, which is sort of right at the right rear corner of the house, that elevation of the ledge is 165.6. And in test pit 6, which is at the front left of the house, that elevation is 167.8. The bottom of our footing is going to be at about elevation 172. So it's giving us a pretty good cushion there. We don't really want to get into ledge to build this house. And then the other major factor that sort of drives this requirement for the 5 feet or more of fill in certain areas is that Garrett needs wheelchair access to the house. And therefore, unlike a house where you have steps getting into the front and inside doors, this walkways at those locations are going to match the first floor of the house. And so there's 3 areas where that happens, and that's at the front door, and then at the garage door, and then at the right side, where right there. So that's going to be the master bedroom. And as you can understand, if there is some sort of an emergency and Garrett needs to get out of the house and he's in the bedroom, he's, you know, asleep at night or whatever, we need to have a door right there. So at those 3 locations, the grade has to match the first floor of the house. And then there's sort of a minor reason, and that is because we want the basement floor, which has some exercise rooms and some other amenities for Garrett, to be able to have full access to a gravity sewer. So we're going to bring the sewer in underneath the basement floor in the left front corner of the house. So those are the things that sort of drive the elevations around the house and drive the need to have more than 5 feet of fill in certain areas. So as far as sort of mitigation, I guess, or at least erosion control, et cetera, first of all of this fill that's going to be brought on is into the site is going to be clean gravel fill. It's not just going to be common borrow. It has to be gravel fill, because most of these areas where we're talking about this 5 feet or more fill are areas where there's walkways and driveways, and those need to be compacted and can't be allowed to settle in the future. All of the disturbed areas at the site will be stabilized with loam and seed or loam and mulch or plantings. The recommended trucking route to the site would be from Route 1A. We think that that brings us past the least amount of residential homes and is the shortest route, and is not as heavily traveled as the route coming from 109. We do show a stabilized construction entrance at Gay Street for the first 50 feet back. We do have erosion control barrier around the limit of work, at least on the sides where we think that the any loose earth could migrate towards either the abutters or toward the wetlands in the back. We do have an order of conditions from the Conservation Commission as some of this work is within 100 feet of the wetlands at the rear of the property. I guess with that, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I could answer any questions that you might have. Garrett could answer any questions you might have. Sean Stewart, the architect, could answer any questions you might have, or Mark Tomasello can answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Nora, do you have any other comments, anything you'd like to add? From
I
staff?
would just confirm that the amount of earth material movement is not enough to have triggered an earth material movement approval for this application. It's only that change in grade of greater than 5 feet that brings this before the board.
Okay, thank you. Ellen, you have your hand up.
Hi, excuse me. Thank you. First, editorially, I think this is a wonderful project and I love the story behind it. And I'm very excited to welcome Garrett to Westwood. I think this is fantastic. My questions are simply the plans that I saw were from December of last year, and the peer review was done late January of this year. And there was a bunch of comments in that, and I hadn't seen a response. So I was just curious if you'd had a chance to kind of respond to some of the comments. In particular, there was a note that because there's some regrading that involves the abutter's property, like they wanted to see written permission from the abutter, just make sure all the T's are crossed and I's are dots. And I hadn't seen any materials that showed any kind of addressing the peer review. So I was just curious where we were at with that.
I'm not sure if Terry Connaughton is here on the call or not, but Terry's actually was the owner of this lot. This lot was actually cut off from his lot itself. And Terry's been very involved in this right along. So Terry's actually probably not going to want me to tell you this, but he's a native New Yorker. So he's a transplant. So anyway, he knows that there's going to be a little bit of grading onto his lot. So I don't see that it's an issue.
I appreciate that. I guess maybe it's more of a question for Nora and our board is, how do we feel about, do we have everything that we need as far as written or otherwise addressing of the things raised in the peer review?
You can include that in a condition in your decision. If you're otherwise ready to approve this, you can have a condition that requires written confirmation from the abutting owner or any other item that you feel still needs to be addressed.
It's hard for me to see on this plan, but I noticed there was a lot of, they're really administrative, but there's notes in the peer review about items that need to be present on the plans. And I'm becoming a stickler for all these things to be, complete just before I sign them. So if we can just put in, that whatever other conditions or recommendations from the peer review that need to be implemented, I'm fine with adding that as a condition. I don't feel the need to continue the hearing or anything. I just kind of wanted to touch on that.
Okay, thanks, Ellen. Any other comments or questions by board members? Okay, don't see any. Mr. Stewart, I saw your hand was raised earlier. I didn't mean to cut you off when I called in Ellen, but did you have something you wanted to add?
John did a great job. So, and I didn't mean to speak during the board's time. So I just wanted to reiterate that because Garrett is in an electric wheelchair, the grade is different than it would be if we had 3 steps in front of the house. And so in each case where there's we go over that 5 feet of fill, it is because of one of the entrances. And so this is purely a result of his safety getting in and out of the house. And then finally, the pathway. Garrett has 2 small children now, and he wants to be able to spend time in his yard with them. And so that pathway is necessary for him. And the grades had to be adjusted so that his wheelchair could move along it safely. So that's it. If it was a house for any other individual, this wouldn't be an issue at all. So.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we've heard from Nora, we've heard from the applicant. Any other comments or questions from board members? Give you an opportunity. Make sure everyone has a chance. Okay, I don't hear, Nora, any other comments or concerns from board members? Do you have draft language?
I do. This is a public hearing though.
Oh, yeah, I didn't see any questions.
I don't see any questions, but I do see a raised hand.
I see a hand raised now. Jim.
I'll give Jim permission to speak.
Giurleo, yeah.
Jim, you have permission to speak. If you could identify your name and your address.
Jim, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry for the delay. I'm Jim Giurleo, 737 Gay Street. My house is directly across the street from the proposed new house. And first of all, I have no objections to the 5 foot, whatever has to be done to make entrance and egress to the house comfortable for Garrett. And I look forward to meeting Garrett and his family and shaking the hand of a real hero. My only concern is this. I not only live across the street from the proposed house, I live across the street from the new Hanlon school that's being built. My only concern is I hope that there's a contact person, whether it's the contractor or the architect or maybe even Terry Connaughton, because issues of the building of the Hanlon, of course, the scale of the Hanlon is so enormous. I don't think anyone expected it, especially the amount of ledge that they've caught there. Anyways, my only concern is I hope I have the ability to talk to someone in the event that there is any concern. That's the only comment I'd like to make, and I don't know if you can identify that person now or who I should contact to find out the contact person.
So excuse me, sir, are you referring to a contact person within the school project or within this house project?
Yeah, no, this house project.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Chairman, I would be happy to give Jim my cell phone number and he can call me at any time.
That's great.
I'd be happy to adjudicate or, listen to his issues and make sure that they get taken care of.
Thank you.
Whatever issues they may be, certainly won't be at the scale of the Hanlon School.
I hope not.
Explosions occur and my pictures in my house swing back and forth.
Thank you. So, Mr. Glosser, maybe you could have those shared through Nora as a contact person,
yes.
Or we can do this offline. Okay. I don't see any more hands raised and there's no questions in the Q&A.
All right, so let me share my screen. So the first item is we would need a motion for waivers. There are certain application requirements that are not usually necessary for a plan of this type, but they're still in the bylaw, and so the board needs to consider granting waivers for them.
So I move that the planning board grant the following waivers in association with the application for earth material movement, environmental impact and design review, EMM-EIDR, approval for 748 Gay Street as described in the application, therefore submitted to the planning board and filed in the office of the town clerk on January 1, 2023, 1, waiver of exterior lighting plan required pursuant to section 7.3.7.2 of the zoning bylaw. 2, waiver of traffic study requirement pursuant to section 7.3.7.3 of the zoning bylaw. 3, waiver of stormwater drainage report required pursuant to section 7.3.7.1.6 of the zoning bylaw. 4, waiver of presentation model required pursuant to section 7.3.7.7 of the zoning bylaw.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing and hearing none, we'll take a roll call vote. Ellen,
Aye.
Kate,
Aye.
Josh,
Aye.
Phil,
Happily vote aye.
and I vote aye as well. Okay, so we
Alright.
move on to motion language for approval of the earth material movement EIDR.
Yes, and before we get into the specific conditions, I just want to point out this condition, which I believe addresses the point that Ellen brought up. This references the beta group memo on this and says prior to the start of work on the project, the applicant shall submit revised plans to address recommendations in the January 25th, 2023 peer review memo from Stephen Borgatti, PE, and Philip Paradis Jr., PE of Beta Group Incorporated for review and approval by the town planner, including the provision of transition ramps and transition curb at location where proposed driveway will cross the existing sidewalk, and documentation from a butter granting permission to modify grading on the abutting property to the south. So I think that, does that address your concerns, Ellen?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Great.
And all
Okay,
the
so
Does,
Oh,
does
sorry.
it require an approval, Nora? Because it says shall submit the plans, but it doesn't say actually to be accepted or approved.
Yes, for approval by the town
For,
planner, so it
review
wouldn't have
and
to,
Oh, but
wouldn't have to
I-
come back here.
My error. You're right. Sorry.
And then all of the other conditions are standard. As you recall, the earth material movement approval is really all about the transport of the dirt. There's not a whole lot of dirt coming on and off the site here, but still whatever movement there is, whatever gravel is brought in, this recommends that the trucks take a route on Gay Street, and it specifies all trucks carrying earth material to or from 748 Gay Street shall be required to access Gay Street from eastbound or westbound High Street or from northbound or southbound Washington Street, and shall proceed directly to the site. No trucks associated with the project shall be permitted to travel on any portion, any portion of, that's wrong, on any other non-arterial road in Westwood. So what this condition gets at is trucks carrying gravel to or from the site or other earth material cannot go down Pine Lane. And, you know, if there's heavy traffic, to avoid intersections of Gay and Washington or Gay and High, the trucks really need to stay on the main roads. There are also provisions about the existing pavement not being damaged. It's a provision about making sure that the fill is non-hazardous. And there is a requirement that the approval is valid for 2 years.
So that being said, Nora, do we have to read the whole thing?
Either you do or I do.
I'll go right ahead, very happily. So I move that the planning board grant the requested earth material movement, environmental impact and design review, EMM-EIDR approval for 748 Gay Street as described in the application, therefore submitted to the planning board and filed in the office of the town clerk on January 1st, 2023, and subject to the following conditions. 1, except as modified by the conditions and findings hereof, the project shall comply with the project plans in all respects, and the applicant shall pursue completion of the project with reasonable diligence and continuity. 2, as read by Nora. 3, is that cool? Can I do that?
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
3, if the project or any condition imposed in this decision requires permit, license, or other approval from any other board, committee, or agency of the town of Westwood or other regulatory agency of the Commonwealth or the federal government, the applicant shall make an appropriate application for the same and shall obtain all required approvals prior to the start of any work. 4, any alterations, modifications, deletions, or changes to the EMM-EIDR approval shall be requested in writing to the town planner and building commissioner prior to implementation. Proposed alterations which are considered de minimis by the building commissioner may be accepted as a note to the file. Proposed alterations which are considered minor by the building commissioner pursuant to section 7.3 of the zoning bylaw shall be considered through the filing of an administrative EMM-EIDR application pursuant to section 7.3.6 of the zoning bylaw, or through the filing of an application of minor modification of EMM-EIDR approval for review by the planning board at a publicly posted planning board meeting. Proposed alterations which are determined to be major by the building commissioner, or by the planning board shall be considered by the planning board as a formal amendment to the EMM-EIDR approval and will require a new public hearing before the planning board. 5, the existing pavement on Gay Street shall be protected from damage from loading and unloading of material and or equipment related to the proposed construction. 6, as read by Nora. 7, any trucks delivering or removing materials shall be covered as to prevent said material from spilling onto the public roadway, and any spilled material shall be cleaned from Gay Street, High Street, Washington Street, and any other roadways traveled in the transport of earth material to and from the site. 8, there shall be no substandard or hazardous fill material used with this project. Prior to the import of any earth material, the applicant shall submit certification to the town planner and building commissioner from the company providing said material, stating that the material does not contain any hazardous material. 9, all project-related construction activities, including any ledge removal, tree removal, and all earth material movement shall comply with the timeframes set forth in the town's general bylaws, chapter 292, for noise and construction, which allows such work Monday through Saturday between the hours of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., and Sunday between the hours of 12 p.m. and 7 p.m. Thank you. 10, the applicant shall promptly repair any damage which the applicant or its agent caused to sidewalks, street pavement, signs, or other fixtures or features within the public right-of-way after first obtaining permission from the Town Department of Public Works. Such repairs shall be performed to the Town of Westwood standards. 11, a copy of this decision and the project plans shall be kept on the project site at all times throughout the period of construction. 12, the EMM-EIDR approval shall lapse if a substantial use thereof or construction thereunder has not begun except for good cause within 2 years following the grant thereof. The planning board may extend such approval for good cause upon the written request of the applicant. In the case of this EMM-EIDR approval, the term substantial use thereof or construction thereunder shall mean the commencement and substantial continued progress of the approved activity.
Second. Great job, Kate.
Yeah. So we have a motion and a second. It should be noted that's the first time I've ever heard in motion language. Is it cool? So, so we have a motion and a second. So we'll take a roll call vote. Or is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote. Ellen.
Aye.
Kate.
Aye.
Phil.
Aye.
Josh.
Aye.
And I vote aye also.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Okay, thank you, members of the
Can
board.
I move that we close the hearing?
Yes.
Sorry.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to close the hearing. Any further discussion? Ellen.
Aye.
Kate.
Aye.
Josh.
Aye.
Phil.
Aye.
I vote aye also.
Thank
Best
you,
of
Mr.
luck on your project. Thank you very much for
Good
everything.
luck with the
Welcome.
project.
Yeah, thanks a
Welcome
lot,
to our
Sean.
town.
You were
Thank
very
you.
helpful.
Thank
See
you.
Garrett. Bye.
All right, now your next
All right.
application, and I have to apologize because I took that one out of order without making you aware of that. The next application is Dish Antenna. This is a continuation of a hearing that was in front of the board. Let me just at your last meeting. And Katie Adams is the applicant, and I'm promoting her to be a panelist for this discussion. And Katie, you can let us know if there's anyone else here that needs to be promoted to be a panelist. As the board, I'm sure recalls, this application came before you at your January 24th meeting. You reviewed all aspects of the plan for the additional antennas. You discussed having a new plan that shows the antennas at a lesser extension from the pole. And you also wanted to have an opportunity to review 2 submittal items that had not been provided previously. One was a structural report and one was a radio frequency report. Both of those have been provided. They're in your packet, as are new plans, revised site plan for the antenna. So Katie, would you like to explain more about your application?
Yeah, I can share my screen if that's all right. Dish
Okay.
has revised all of the, let's see, let me just make sure I share the right screen. Here we go. Has revised their documents to show a flush mount now, so that, you know, the panel array is not sticking far off the tower as it was in the last design. It's really from tower to the front of the panel antennas, it's going to be protruding 2 feet 9 inches, which is smaller than some of these other carriers that are here. And we did provide a new structural analysis. Of course, it's passing, it's a smaller mount, flush mounted antennas, you know, didn't make much of a difference structurally one way or the other, but we did run that, and I did provide the updated structural analysis. And we had some more photo simulations done. So this is just looking at the tower. I think they took these photos with a drone so that you could get a better idea of where the antennas are in line with the trees. So this is where the, you know, just the site location. And then these are showing where the first set of photos are taken, second set is taken from, and then third set is taken. This is before the addition of the antennas. And then this would be after. You can barely see them. They are above the tree line, so they will provide adequate coverage, but they are flush mounted, so they will not be protruding any further than the other arrays. Let me just go to the next couple of pages here. This is location number 2, before. And this is after. Oops, sorry about that. And location number 3, before and after. Are there any other parts of the documents that you would like me to show? I know that this was the main concern, was the mount and how far it protruded from the pole itself, because I believe you said this is the only pole in the town that is not a stealth tower. It's not concealed.
Right.
So we really did want to try to keep it uniform with the other antennas up there.
Okay, but thank you very much for those efforts. Any board members with questions? Okay. Any other concerns? Everyone comfortable with the application?
I had
else we'd like to address. Yeah, go ahead,
I
Josh.
had one quick question about the RF compliance report. The face value showed that it was a 500 to 5,000% MPE, but we're saying that we're going to post a notice sign. Is that why is that exactly?
The notice sign is pretty typical to go on the fence or within the compound, just as a precaution, just as an extra, just as an extra step. There's no exposure level on the ground from where these antennas are located. I've never been to a compound that doesn't have signs.
Yeah, no, I was actually wondering why it wasn't a warning sign, because it's 10 times the value of the MPE. But you're saying that's because that's ground level and there's no access to the.
That's correct. It's because
Okay.
it's, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. It's because
Yep.
it's ground level. Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments or concerns from board members? Okay, I don't see
I
any.
just want to say thank you for coming back to us so quickly. Appreciate the quick turnaround.
Oh yeah, it's no problem.
Agreed.
Give the public a moment or two if they have a question.
I have one question. Is
Concern?
there a generator associated with this?
No, they're not installing a generator.
Okay, I don't see any comments or questions from our attendees. So, Nora, do we have language?
Yes, just one second. Okay, like the last application, we begin with a motion for waivers of items that are not required for this application.
I move the planning board grant the following waivers in association with the application for wireless communication overlay district environmental impact and design review, WCOD-EIDR, approval for dish wireless co-location at 100 to 200 Lowder Brook Drive as described in the application, therefore submitted to the planning board and filed in the office of the town clerk on December 21st, 2022. Number one, waiver of section 7.3.7.1 pertaining to all required site plan items related to stormwater management, parking, landscaping, sewerage, and trash disposal. Number two, waiver of section 7.3.7.2 pertaining to the submission of an exterior lighting plan. Number three, waiver of section 7.3.7.3 pertaining to the submission of a traffic study. Number four, waiver of section 7.3.7.7 pertaining to the submission of a presentation model.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the waivers? Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote. Kate.
Aye.
Josh.
Aye.
Phil.
Aye.
Ellen.
Aye.
And I vote aye also.
So before you go through the next, the motion with all the conditions, all of them are standard conditions except for one, except for two, sorry. So I'm going to read number two. The applicant shall submit revised plans where the overall site plan on sheet A1 corresponds accurately to the configuration of existing conditions demonstrated in the aerial photograph on sheet A1. So if you look at the aerial and the plan set, they're slightly different, and this has been a recurring issue from plans that are generated by the leaseholder. I'm not sure if it's Crown Castle, whoever the leaseholder is, provides site plans to the different carriers, and they're slightly off from what's there. So we just need to have the plan accurate for when the building permit plan comes in. And then the other item that's slightly different than other applications is this condition: the face of the dish antenna shall extend no further than 33 inches from the surface of the monopole. And I believe that's in conformance with the plan that you see today. All the other conditions are standard conditions for antennas.
All right, I move that the planning board grant the requested environmental impact and design review WCOD-EIDR approval for dish wireless co-location at 100 to 200 Lowder Brook Drive as described in the application, therefore submitted to the planning board and filed in the office of the town clerk on December 21st, 2022, subject to the following conditions. One, except as modified by the conditions and findings hereof, the project shall comply with the project plans in all respects, and the applicant shall pursue completion of the project with reasonable diligence and continuity. Number two, the applicant shall submit revised plans wherever the overall site plan on sheet A1 corresponds accurately to the configuration of existing conditions demonstrated in the aerial photograph on sheet A1. Number three, the applicant shall verify through post-installation monitoring and report of an independent radio engineering consultant that the new and replacement antennas and remote radio heads will not interfere nor have any negative effect on the town's emergency radio communications. Number four, the face of the dish antennas shall extend no further than 33 inches from the surface of the monopole. Number five, the antenna array and all mounting brackets, bands, cables, and all associated equipment shall be painted to match the matte color of the existing facility and shall be repainted as necessary to minimize any fading or discoloration. Number six, the visual and aesthetic impact of the antennas, mounting brackets, and all other attachments shall be minimized to the fullest practical extent. All cables and bands shall be bundled in the most unobtrusive manner possible, shall be secured directly to the pole and located on the portion of the pole which is least visible from any public way. Number seven, If there are any cabling, bands, and equipment associated with a previous carrier at this height location of the pole that are no longer needed, they shall be removed by the applicant prior to the installation of the antennas and equipment covered by this decision. Number 8, if the project or any condition imposed in this decision requires permit, license, or other approval from any other board, committee, or agency of the town of Westwood or other regulatory agency of the Commonwealth or the federal government, the applicant shall make an appropriate application for the same. If any condition of such permit, license, or other approval from any other board, committee, or agency is inconsistent with this decision, the applicant shall make application to the planning board for amendment of this decision, and the planning board shall consider such application in accordance with the requirements of MGL Chapter 40A 9 and all applicable planning board rules and regulations. Number 9, the planning board shall be notified within 30 days of any discontinuance of use of the wireless facility. All antennas, brackets, cabling, and any other associated equipment shall be fully removed within 6 months of abandonment or discontinuance of the use. This WCOD-EIDR approval shall lapse if a substantial use thereof or construction thereunder has not begun except for good cause within 2 years following the grant thereof. The planning board may extend such approval for good cause upon the written request of the applicant. In the case of this WCOD-EIDR approval, the term substantial use thereof or construction thereunder shall mean the commencement and substantial progress of approved installation activity. Number 11, a copy of this decision and the project plans shall be kept on the project site at all times during construction.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the conditions? Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote. Kate?
Aye.
Josh?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
Ellen?
Aye.
I vote aye.
Thank you. So this was a public hearing and there were no hands raised and no
Yeah, I didn't see any.
comments.
So motion to close?
Yes, please.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close the hearing. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote. Josh?
Aye.
Ellen?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
I vote aye. Thank you very much. Best of luck with your project.
Thank you very much. I will be seeing you again. I have another project coming up on another pole in town, so
All
Thank
right.
you very
have a
much.
great
See you
night,
soon.
everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
All right, your next application is an application for EIDR approval of a change of use for 200 University Avenue and also for consideration of a special permit for a reduction in required parking for 200 University Avenue involving 240 University Avenue as their backup parking. Jennifer Downey is our applicant. I'm promoting her to a panelist. And Jennifer, if you can let me know if there's anyone else here that you would like to have brought in. I see Evan Lewis, I think is also associated with this application. Evan, I'm making you a panelist. You just have to accept it. And
Good evening.
Jennifer-
Could I- Excuse
Hi.
me.
No, that's all right. Jennifer has not yet accepted.
And for the record, my name is Evan Lewis with Platinum Partners, 909 Washington Street in Stoughton. And for this presentation, I would actually like to ask for Barry Crimmins to be admitted as a presenter.
All right. I will ask Barry to promote to panelist. All right, you may begin with your presentation and you can share your screen for any documents you'd like to share.
Can't hear you, Jennifer. If you're trying to talk to.
Thank you. I believe there may be a couple more folks, Mr. Chairman, that are joining us. Mr. David Steele.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. All right,
Okay, sorry.
David Steele has been invited to be a panelist.
Okay.
Who
Yeah,
else?
and Dexter Preston, please.
All right. David has joined and Dexter has joined as well.
Great. Thank you very much. Good evening again, Mr. Chairman, members of the planning board. For the record, Attorney Barry R. Crimmins of 909 Washington Street in Stoughton, here on behalf of the applicant, Astrea Bioseparations, for the property located at 200 University Ave in Westwood. This is an application, as was mentioned, for a change of use from the existing use. The building was constructed in 1963, according to the assessor's records. It was purchased by the current owner in 2015, and thereafter, in 2019, the property went through a previous EIDR with this board for renovations that were made at the site. The current application is triggered because of the change of use from the current use, which is largely office and warehousing, and we are introducing a manufacturing component to the current use. I would like, if I may, Mr. Chairman, to call upon Mr. David Steele of Astrea Bioseparations so he could explain exactly what it is that Astrea does and what they're looking to do at this location, and he could do so much more eloquently than I can. So if I may, call upon
Sure.
David Steele, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Barry, and very pleased to meet you all. And I'm not sure I'll be any more eloquent than Barry, given that I'm over in the UK at the moment, and it's about 2:30 in the morning. So in terms of Astrea Bioseparations, I'll talk just very quickly about who we are, a little bit about what we do and what our intentions for the University Avenue site are. So we are a life sciences company. We're established in Cambridge in the UK, not Cambridge in Massachusetts, about 35 years ago. We are an organisation of about 120 to 130 staff. We're headquartered in Cambridge in the UK, and we also have an R&D site there. We have manufacturing sites in Stoughton, which is obviously very close to the proposed site. We have a manufacturing site in the Isle of Man, which is where I am based. That's just off the UK coast. And we have a manufacturing site in Montreal in Canada. What we do is we sell purification products to kind of pharmaceutical companies, so companies such as Moderna, Takeda, Roche, and our products support their manufacturing processes. We're a life sciences business very similar to Repligen, who I understand are a large outfit in Boston, and they have sites in Marlborough and Waltham. Historically, we've expanded across Europe. That's been our kind of business model. But we're now looking to grow and expand in the US, which is really what the intention of kind of the expansion of the University Avenue, if we're successful, site will do. That will give us a strong footprint. In terms of what we plan to do, we will be kind of phasing the investment in the site over a kind of a period of time, probably over the next 2 to 3 years. And the lease that we've got for the site is around 8 years with an 8-year proposed extension. For us, this is a significant investment for Astrea, and we're very kind of excited to be kind of expanding into the US. The site will host, as Barry has mentioned, manufacturing of our purification products, including those that are currently manufactured at the Stoughton site. The site will have some warehousing to support the manufacturing, and that will also support the UK sales of the product that we make at the US, and also material that we've imported from elsewhere. The site will have offices and warehousing, and the offices will essentially be there to support the manufacturing and to support the warehousing. So the offices are there really to provide seating in areas for the manufacturing and warehouse staff when they need to do their paperwork and that kind of thing. So that's a little bit about kind of Astrea and what our intentions are for the facility. Okay, thank you.
So,
all right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may now at this point, call upon Dexter Preston with Dacon, who is our architect and construction manager. Dexter can talk about what the nature of the changes are to the site, which are largely interior. Again, the site previously went through an EIDR starting, I believe, in 2019. That DACON was also involved with. So Dexter, would you like to walk through that, as well as to touch on, Mr. Chairman, if we made the request for the reduction in the number of parking spaces?
Yeah, thank you.
Dexter.
Yes, thank you, Barry, and good evening, Chairman, and good evening, Board. Thank you for your time this evening. I'd like to present our project from an architectural standpoint. I'm going to share my screen if I may. As you've seen, we have the 200 University Ave site. I'm first going to bring up just an image to give you a general context of where we are. We are at 200 University Ave. Across the street, we have a University Station Plaza, Wegmans and such. And this is an existing building on an existing site. Our project, as I zoom into it, is not going to be renovating anything on the exterior. It is entirely interior of the site. We will be only doing a retrofit of the office spaces and the storage lot within the building itself. So no exterior upgrades to the footprint of the building, nor parking or site. They're going to utilize what's already been established. That goes for underground systems under our previously approved EIDR process. For the manufacturing process, we've gone through our programming effort with our client. I believe we have our zoning board meeting next week. A plan for layout of the facility was submitted for rejection, so we could go to that zoning board and present this as well for our change of use. This was the plan we submitted. We have updated through the programming process with our client, revised plans for the layout of the facility. During that programming effort and schematic design effort, we understand the use, as David mentioned, for the staffing and the concurrent use between the office spaces and their manufacturing. And that developed the conversations around the required number of parking spaces. So I'm going to refer to the letters, and I believe there's been revised letters were submitted, and I'm sorry if those are not available to the links that I saw that were provided, but I believe there was a couple of revised letters for the parking count, and Nora, I'm not sure if those were available from Evan, and Barry had submitted those back over to update the plan board site for the available parking counts.
I believe they were updated as of January 24th.
Okay, I was just concerned as I saw on the website here that the agenda still had some of the old documentation referring to 240 University Ave, and I wanted to make sure I address the conditions that we're seeking approval on for our site that did not involve the 240 University Ave project. So I'd like to speak to that, if I may, on the conditions on our site at 200 University Ave and the change from no longer requiring spaces at 240 University. Our revised special permit application that we put in requests reduction of parking for the use at the facility. The maximum occupancy of the space will only be 20 staff total for the entire build out, and I'll bring up the plan here just for reference. In looking through the zoning requirements, our required number of parking spaces we've calculated for the light manufacturing space, as well as what you see here in the kind of green space for the storage or mechanical spaces, and the purple office are all described within the square footage of our special permit request, which I believe, if I have it right here, we've gone through and done the calculations for those two spaces, and the total principal use that we actually required for square footage within the space is only 21. We are actually going to have 20 staff total at one time, and the total parking provided, not including handicap, is 22. So we are seeking approval of a special permit for utilizing the existing parking on site without any additional support off-site parking. Additional requirements within the zoning does also require expansion for future parking under the light manufacturing use. So we are also submitting for a request a waiver to forego the requirements of the future parking requirement, and that would be listed within that waiver here for the same reasons as before: the non-concurrent use between the office space and the light manufacturing spaces, and the maximum employee count of 20 within the facility. This property is looking to be, or our client is looking for a long-term investment in the community to bring their operations and grow their operations. The plans that have been submitted are actually their overall master plan. The initial occupancy of the space will be only 2 to 3 staff members, and they're looking to grow over the next 5 years to get to that maximum occupancy of 20 staff. So we are looking at a long-term growth. The required parking will be obviously at minimal initially, and it will grow to that 20 staff members on site. The other items within the parking and benefits to the overall site here, if I bring up the site plans, the existing building was a distribution warehouse for cheese. I believe it was a Boston Cheese company. They did utilize a number of loading docks. We are actually reducing the number of active bays for trucking down to 2. So there'll be less truck traffic, as well as obviously minimal employee traffic on the site, as well as the employees will primarily be doing standard business hours and only minimal staff during off-peak hours of 9 to 5. So I wanted to adjust that as well. So we're actually reducing the traffic loads on site. Other benefits I think I can talk to, I believe we're in the impact study that we had. Sorry, let me go back to that. Revised statement here. I believe I also had those listed out for the requests for both the special permit and the waiver are listed within the environmental impact statement. And that is the extent of the presentation that I have.
And Dexter, could you just clarify the issue of the non-concurrent uses as far as the operation is concerned, so that the board understands what we're talking about there?
Of course. Thank you, Barry. So within the space, the operations, let me turn off this. Within the space, there's a number of light manufacturing have these beaters that actually these Agros, and David could actually probably speak to the exact process a little more clear articulately than I could, but the machines that actually create the product require minimal supervision, and the number of staff that actually be in these rooms to change during the cycles of the processes are minimal. And I think there's a total of 6 beaters. This is the final condition layout, along with a number of clean rooms. Each clean room would have 1 actor within each one of it. And each beater, I think, would have 1 staff, or probably even maybe 1 staff for every 2 beaters required per the long durations of the cycles. And then the rest of the time, they'd be utilizing the office spaces. So the non-concurrent use is really if somebody is actually operationally required to be within the beater room or within one of the clean rooms, they are not actually within the office space at all. So that goes back to the non-concurrent use and the maximum total staff on site of 20.
Would you be able to blow this image up a little bit? I don't think this was included in your submission.
This is something we had originally done the test to fit plan, which was something we needed to get in for the change of use. The overall balance between what you see here in the light blue, which is light manufacturing, purple, and the light green being storage use, is comparable to what we had originally submitted, between the blue, gray, and orange here being light manufacturing, storage use, and office. So if I put these side by side, you can see while we've expanded the design and we've enhanced the design, we have not changed the programmatic areas in question. There you go.
Good. Thank you, Dexter. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, would be happy to answer any questions that the members may have.
All right, thank you. Board members, Ellen, I see your hand up.
Thank you. I noticed that it was hard to see on my screen, but it looked like the environmental impact statement that you put on screen had some revisions. And I was wondering if you could speak to that, because I know there were some edits or additional information from the peer review requested for that, but the only version of that I've seen was the original. So I was actually going to ask if you'd had a chance to review the comments from the peer review and answer any of them. And it looks like you might have, but I'm just wondering if you could speak to it.
Yes, I'm trying to find I always like to speak to people's faces. I'm trying to find the window where everyone's video is, but apparently I can't find that one. Let me see if I can bring that up for you.
While he's looking for that, I think largely the biggest difference was what Dexter alluded to when we were originally proposing off-site parking at the 240 University Ave location on the other side of Dartmouth Street. And for various reasons, we decided it was better if we could locate all of our parking on site, not have to deal with the 240 Dartmouth Street. So much of the peer review went to the question of the use of 240 University Avenue.
Revolving sidewalks and such, yes.
If I could just interject, I think there's some confusion here about exactly what you're asking for. So this application has gone back and forth a few times, from requesting a special permit pursuant to section 6.1.9 to requesting a waiver pursuant to 6.1.12. And it looks like the letter from Mr. Preston actually refers to both at the same time. If I could just call your attention to the third paragraph of the letter. It says,
yes.
per bylaw subsection 6.1.2, the total parking spaces required for the proposed mixed-use areas within the existing building cannot be achieved on site. Refer to special permit request for section 6.1.9. So that's how the board was given this project, and then looks like it was subsequently changed from what you're speaking tonight, that you would like to, instead of ask for a special permit pursuant to 6.1.9, you're asking for a waiver pursuant to 6.1.12. Evan Lewis and I had previously discussed that a waiver subject to 6.1.12 is for a joint parking situation. It's not applicable to a project unless you are taking into account the neighboring property of 240 University.
Right.
You don't have a joint parking arrangement unless you have parking between two properties.
Right.
Okay, so I guess the confusion was we were actually only really looking for the special permit, which I believe would be the reduction of parking.
Under 6.1.9, yes.
Correct.
And I'm sorry, my question wasn't actually about that part of the impact statement. Let me just pull up. I was referring to the comment, revised impact statement to include discussion of special features, safety, microclimate, energy efficiency, detrimental effects, solid waste, et cetera. And also, a comment to provide information on noise levels. I was curious if I hadn't seen any of that in the environmental impact study. I was just curious if, since I see that you had some revisions, if there'd been any time to kind of address some of those comments.
The environmental impact statement was last submitted on January 5th, and you have the only copy. So what you have seen that does not address those items that were brought up by the peer review consultant is the last environmental impact statement that was submitted.
Okay, that's why it's hard for me to see. I saw some sort of revision in the impact statement, but maybe it's a different impact statement of, okay, so I guess that would be my comment is I'd like to see some responses to those points because I think they're pertinent and they're important. They're of interest to me.
I actually believe, through you, Mr. Chairman, to Ms. Rawlings, I actually believe that each of the comments in the peer review were addressed by means of a subsequent filing of the revised plans, subsequent to getting the peer review report. But his comments that relate to the rules and regulations, and then the comments that relate to the zoning bylaw, I believe all of those were addressed.
I'm going to bring up the copy of the environmental impact statement that I have attached to the application, so we can just be looking at it while you're discussing it. Just give me one moment. Okay, this is the latest environmental impact statement. It's attached to the application. Let me share my screen. This is it dated January 5th. I think you showed a later one, but I don't see it in the application. Evan, if you can-
Yes, Nora, let me speak to that for just one sec. So we replaced our original project description with this updated environmental impact statement.
Okay, so it's just a different location. All right,
Exactly.
let me just go back to your application then. So this is the one you said, so you have it uploaded to project description as opposed to environmental impact statement.
Exactly.
So Alan, was there a specific section of this that you wanted to review?
I think the noise levels are of interest, and also just the safety. That's particularly, I know the water resource overlay discussion is the purview of the zoning board on this particular application, but it's still a concern for me personally. So I noticed you mentioned one, ethanol in small amounts, but that was my other question is, I hear manufacturing and that can mean many different things. So is ethanol really the only hazardous material that would be potentially in play here? Like I don't know your industry very well, so I was curious for a little bit more explanation of what the safety hazards are and what your mitigation plans are.
Can I just speak to this really quick? I'm sorry if there was any confusion. We submitted all of that as part of the ZBA filing about the noise, the odor, the ethanol, where it's stored. All of that has been submitted, and I guess we didn't understand that also needed to be submitted as part of this package too. So that has all actually been addressed. It just was not submitted to this board. It was submitted to ZBA.
The
So
hazardous materials.
the way to get all those documents from that submission to here, and that would be helpful.
So let me go into the ZBA application and find what you've submitted to address noise concerns.
We have a letter from an engineer in terms of the HVAC equipment, what goes outside, and also about vibration and odor. Everything for HVAC will be standard equipment. It's no different than any of the equipment running at any of the buildings around the area. And as far as their equipment inside, it should not impact any sound outside of the building. And then also within that, they all only use ethanol, and we have a plan that actually shows, and we've also submitted to Barry, help me out. What did we submit to? Was it the Board of Health?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the Board of Health and the Zoning Board will both address the Water Resource Protection Overlay District and the storage and use of chemicals within that, but they will not address noise concerns. That would be before this board. So I'm not seeing that letter regarding noise. Do you know what's called in your zoning
Yeah, it should
application?
have been attached.
Yes, I can actually speak to that. It's titled Astrea Compliance HVAC Letter 117/2020.
All right, great. Let me open that up and
Thanks, Evan.
share my screen.
Excellent. Excellent.
So we had our HVAC engineer review all the equipment that would be outside of the building that could have any possible impact. And he provided us a stamped letter indicating that it wouldn't be within anything outside of the area that we're in.
So you guys won't need an emergency generator?
No.
No.
Okay. You don't have ISO classified manufacturing rooms? That need to be kept? No.
No.
Are they ISO 7 or are they not ISO certified?
ISO 7.
ISO 7.
So which is it?
ISO 7.
All right.
7.
And you guys don't need to maintain HVAC flow to maintain your ISO classifications if the power goes out?
I'll speak to that. We've spoken about that. That's been brought to our kind of attention. But we've agreed that if there is a power outage, then we'll have to recover the rooms and do the requalifications that are required for ISO rooms, so that we don't have to, kind of accept that kind of additional cost and issue. So we're prepared to live with that outage, basically.
Awesome. Thank
you.
David,
So I can add
David, while
that
you're still here, do you
document.
want to speak to the materials, the aggregros?
Yes, I'm happy to. In terms of the kind of materials that we use in manufacturing, we use the alcohol as a preservative, so that becomes like about a 20% alcohol mix that's used as preservative. The raw materials that we use in the manufacturing process that you saw in the top left-hand corner of the picture that Dexter shared, the raw materials are purified water, agarose, which is a seaweed derivative. It's essentially a purified component of seaweed, and we then use an ammonium salt, ammonium phosphate salt, which is essentially kind of binds it all together. That liquor is then dried, and that dried liquor then becomes our product that we then pack in the ISO 7 clean rooms, that then goes on to the customer. So that's a very kind of high level kind of view of our process. So none of the materials other than the alcohol pose a hazard.
Question for you guys too. You said that it was 20%. Is that purchased that way, or do you buy it in bulk and titrate it?
So the proposal longer term will be to purchase it in bulk and then kind of dilute it down with the purified water that we're proposing to have manufactured on site. So obviously we need to make sure, and this I think should be addressed through the zoning board, the storage and kind of handling of that to make sure that that is kind of safely stored and held. So we're talking about kind of flammables cabinets, I think, Dexter.
Yes, we are providing 2 different flammable cabinets for a single drum of ethanol in 2 locations, one which is considered an empty, ready for pickup, and another is full. Both are going to be in an area that is adjacent to an emergency shower and eye wash, as well as the Board of Health has a spill plan submitted.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, they're also flammable, so the emergency eye wash and shower aren't really necessary, but whatever.
For manufacturing, but it's helpful.
I actually wanted to give you guys more credit because like 20% ethanol is actually a class 2 flammable. So, I mean, you guys are doing a little bit more than you need to unless you're dispensing and titrating from bulk. So, and I guess a question for Nora, why would this go to the Zoning Board of Appeals in terms of some of the other like
Any
components?
chemicals, any materials that are considered hazardous materials by the Board of Health have to be addressed within the water resource protection area. The planning board is the special permit granting authority for water resource protection area applications that are filed under the University Avenue mixed use overlay district or under a flexible multiple use overlay district. But except for those 2 instances, it always goes to the Zoning Board of Appeals. So they are the special permit granting authority for a water resource protection overlay district.
Even if that's a very small quantity generator, it doesn't matter. It's whatever hazardous materials are there.
Yes, it could be a small generator. We're very protective of our well water.
Okay, I thought that it was a by right if it was a very small quantity generator.
So I think it was up to the Board of Health to review and determine what the qualifications were, and they determined that it did need to go to the ZBA.
Great.
And we're in front of the zoning board next Wednesday night on that application.
Okay. Any other board members with comments, questions, or concerns for the applicant? Okay, hearing.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to
sorry,
understand. I'm sorry. I want to understand a summary of the parking. Nora, can you just summarize what would normally be required? Why would we allow less?
So going back to, let me get back to Dexter's letter. And I'm now in the zoning board application. So let me just get back to the planning board application so I can call that out. So there's a calculation here that
Mhm.
Dexter has made. When I spoke to the building commissioner, he had determined that the parking count required was 30 spaces and that the site provided 24. It looks like maybe the areas of the different uses were not the same when he reviewed it as they are now. So if we go with these numbers, it looks like 32.2 and we round up to 33 parking spaces would be required for the current use. And as many as 12 additional ones would be required for a proposed future expansion. So that would actually get you, because we do round up for each of them. So that would get you to, I believe, 44 parking spaces that would be required in total. There are 24 parking spaces on the site. So that would leave you a shortage of 20 spaces. If this is a request for a special permit pursuant to 6.1.9, the board can waive the requirement that those additional 20 spaces be available now if they feel that the proposed use and the number of employees that are associated with the facility at this point in time are less than the 24 spaces that are available. You can approve that, but you can only approve that if you have a demonstration from the applicant that those other 20 spaces are available through other means if they're needed in the future. And so my discussion early on this project with Evan and Jennifer was that the additional spaces, and I didn't think we were talking about 20 at that time. I think we were only talking about 8, would have to be provided at 240 University Avenue. So while the board can allow a special permit to reduce the number of parking spaces that are now allowed now, there has to be some provision put in place to show that the additional parking spaces could be found in the future. And that would require an agreement.
Is that for future use, Nora? A tenant beyond this tenant?
It's for this tenant or a future tenant. Yeah. So let me stop sharing this and I'll show you the section of the zoning bylaw that we're talking about.
I thought that was a secondary item.
I think that there was a misunderstanding on our part because we thought that that
The
if,
waiver would be for the
if
future.
this tenant just didn't need the parking, that if
right,
tenant
so
turned over in the future, then they could you guys would
You have
come.
to resubmit.
So here's
resubmit.
section 6.1.9. That's the reduction of required minimum number of parking spaces. It says the planning board may grant a special permit. And that these are the findings that the board must make in order to grant a special permit. And most of the findings, the first few findings we're all set with. First, that the particular use proposed does not warrant the minimum number of parking spaces otherwise required under this section. So I think we've heard from Mr. Steele that they do not need 40 some odd spaces right now, that the 24 spaces on site are sufficient for his business. The next finding, that the issuance of a special permit would reduce the environmental impact and enhance the aesthetic quality of the proposed project. I think the board may be able to find that by recognizing that in order to find 20 more spots on that site, you'd be demolishing portions of the building. The next finding is that the total floor area of the building or structure associated with the special permit is no greater than that which would be permitted absent the grant of the special permit pursuant to this section. I think the board could find that that provision has been met because it's an existing building. And the building could continue to be used for non-manufacturing, just warehouse use as is. It's the warehouse use only that generates the need for this special permit. This next section, though, is the problematic one. The planning board would have to find that the number of parking spaces otherwise required pursuant to 6.1.2 could be accommodated on the subject parcel or on nearby parcels if a change in use or in the intensity or character of use ever requires an increase of parking pursuant to section 6.1.8.2, and that sufficient provisions securing the continued availability of land for such additional parking and the ability to construct such additional parking are assured in a manner satisfactory to the planning board. Such provisions may include a demonstration of physical and financial ability to construct additional surface or structured parking spaces in compliance with the requirements of 6.1.2 or such other assurances as are satisfactory to the planning board. So you would not, if you're not able to provide these 20 additional parking spaces sometime in the future on 240 University Avenue, then there has to be some other means of establishing this additional parking in the future that is acceptable to the planning board. And for planning board members, I can compare this to the Stagecoach building on High Street, where the board recently approved a restaurant that needed additional parking. And in that case, the property owner owned another adjacent property on Hartford Street that had excess parking. You allowed the additional parking needed for this restaurant to be on that site, and you required an easement over the parking spaces from the property owner in the event that the property owner might sell one or the other, and they might be under two different ownerships in the future. So I think that's the question that has to be addressed here if you're pursuing section 6.1.9. If you're pursuing section 6.1.12 for the waiver, it's slightly different. And in that case, what you're doing is you're saying that 200 University Avenue and 240 University Avenue are sharing the parking lots. So it probably practically comes down to the same thing.
So if they're sharing the parking lots, which there's ample parking at 240 and they're both the same property owner, does that still require an easement?
It would require this approval. It would have a condition that would require a some type of an agreement that the joint parking is permitted for this use for as long as this use is in place.
Okay.
It would also, though, because you would actually be using the spaces then, not sometime in the future, but they'd be reserved now, it would require a connection, a safe pedestrian connection.
Oh yeah, a
between the two
crosswalk
lots.
or something. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well,
So
then,
what-
like we would be looking for the waiver.
All right, so let me go to section 6.1.12 so the board can review that, and please interrupt me if anyone has questions. So here's section 6.1.12, reduction of required number of joint off-street parking spaces.
All right, Nora, are you sharing your screen?
Yeah, no, I'm not seeing a screen.
Yeah, I'm not seeing your
Okay.
screen, Nora.
Let me get that up. Do you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, so here are the findings that the planning board would have to make to grant this waiver. That the demand for the joint shared off-street parking spaces differs significantly by the time of day between the various uses. That a significant number of joint off-street parking spaces are available to satisfy the parking demand for each use during the time period with the highest total combined parking demand. That the buildings associated with the requested waiver are pre-existing, that the total floor area of those buildings is no greater than that which would be permitted absent the grant of a waiver pursuant to this section. That would apply if you were putting an addition on, which you're not. That satisfactory provisions have been made for an increase in the number of joint shared parking spaces up to the minimum number otherwise required in section 6.1.10 or 6.1.11 in the event that a change in use or the intensity or character of use results in an increased joint shared parking demand. Such provisions may include a demonstration of physical and financial ability to construct additional surface or structured parking spaces in compliance with the requirements of 6.1.10 or 6.1.11 or such other assurances that are satisfactory to the planning board. And then that the issuance of this waiver would not be inconsistent with the intent of the bylaw. The waiver is a little bit more flexible than the special permit, and the planning board has a little bit of a wider range of how they look at that. But they would need to look at the two parcels together, the uses that are in each parcel, and determine that the parking is sufficient to cover the demand of both properties.
Okay. Yeah, I guess we'll have to get that together to show. I mean, 240 is not really being used at all. The security lock occupies that building.
My question would be if it says if there's ever a change in use, but that would then require the parking to be recalculated for whatever the change of use is in the future.
It would be. So one way that the board can handle it if you're doing it under the waiver is they can make their waiver applicable only to this business use.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas a special permit would run with the land.
Right. So I believe through.
What if you had an option with the change of use with 240? So that if that occurred, that you could then have some ability to increase your parking as needed.
So obviously the goal for our team would be to avoid having to utilize parking spaces that are on another lot, especially when they're not going to be needed by the use of our tenant or client. So if there's a way in which we can pursue that avenue and that path, that would be desired. I'm not sure. It sounds like since this special permit would carry with the land, that would require that wouldn't be achievable, since the change of use would, if ever, impact to storage or even light manufacturing without the concurrent use, then it would always be more parking required, and the physical constraints of the site wouldn't allow it. So it sounds like the special permit is not an avenue we can go down. Sounds like the waiver is the option, but with the waiver, it's still, there's no way under the waiver to allow for a reduction of the future use requirement at all.
I don't believe there is without an easement that would then limit the use of 240 University Avenue.
Nora, could the applicant have some sort of agreement with, I don't know, the MBTA parking lot down the street and have a shuttle service if that was required, in terms of an alternate parking situation? Or I'm trying to think outside the box here.
Yeah, thank you. That's same
So
things.
the
We know
planning
the
board
spaces
has-
aren't needed, so we're trying to think if there's any other place we could put them. That's
The planning board
not-
has complete discretion there. So if it's acceptable to you, it can be part of your decision. That would require a document from the MBTA, which I think would be extremely difficult to get, because I know we have been working since 2013 to try and get an agreement with the property owner to get an alternate entrance to the train facility. It took maybe 6 years to get approval of a bicycle storage area in the parking garage associated with the University Station project. So I wouldn't hold out much hope for that, but maybe there's another user in the University Station area that has sufficient extra parking, and you could work to make an agreement there. For instance, right across the street behind
Target.
David's Bridal, there are often there are so many empty spaces in the University Avenue lot. So maybe there was a possibility of going there.
Well, right behind our building is an empty lot.
Yeah.
So if I may, Mr. Chairman, through you, just to get a clarification, assuming we were to locate, whether it's across the street or adjacent to us, additional parking to meet the parking requirements, is the evidence of that simply an agreement with that other property owner that indicates that they're willing to allow us to use those spaces? Would that typically be the nature of what the board would be looking for?
That is what the board has required in past instances. And
Okay.
it has to be a recorded document that survives the transfer of ownership of that property.
But it doesn't have to be an easement, does it, Nora?
It
As
doesn't have to
long
be
as
an
it's-
easement. It has to be an
Okay.
agreement.
It has to be an agreement recorded, so everyone has
Right.
notice of it.
Mhm.
So it has to be some contract, which is where I was thinking option or something else.
Right.
That, because of the recordation, would then put everybody on notice and we can rely upon it.
Right.
And you have to be able to rely on it for the duration of the tenancy.
Right.
Right. So I don't think we have an issue with the requirement of a parking agreement. I think what was potentially problematic for us was when we were led to believe it was going to have to be an easement, which created a whole host of other issues. But if it's only an agreement that would be executed by the parties in recordable form, recorded at the Registry of Deeds, I don't think we would have an issue with that. So I just wanted to clarify that aspect of it.
Yeah, I didn't think it needed to be an easement, which is why I was asking Nora the question.
Right.
With the recordation, I think an agreement probably works.
Right. And the landlord